LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Iain Dale.
Hello, a very good evening. I'm Iain Dale. Welcome to the programme. It's 7 minutes on LBC. Now, if you'd like to watch us, as you can always do nowadays on LBC on this show, just go to the LBC app, Global Player, or the LBC YouTube channel. Now, it's been a big day for Reform UK. Nigel Farage has been unveiling his top team to fight the next election. He calls it a shadow cabinet, but I must admit I have to correct him on that because there is only one shadow cabinet. It is the leader of the opposition's shadow cabinet. Now, the Liberal Democrats used to try and portray their frontbench team as a shadow cabinet. You can't really do that because it's absolutely not. But that's a minor nitpicking thing from me. He unveiled Robert Jenrick as his Treasury spokesman. He unveiled Zia Youssef as his Home Affairs spokesman. He unveiled Suella Braverman as his Education spokesman. He unveiled Lee Anderson as his Chief Whip. And Richard Tice as a Business, Energy and something else, which I've now forgotten. But he will basically look after all the environmental side of Reform's policies, the business side of their policies. And also, he's touted to be Deputy Prime Minister, which in some ways is a bit of a sop to Richard Tice because he wanted to have the Treasury portfolio, but that's gone to Robert Jenrick, who, let's remember, has only been in Reform UK for a very, very short time. So, simple question for you in this hour. Do you think that this shows that Nigel Farage has got a competent team, an energetic team, an exciting team? Do you think they are a team that could effectively run Britain after a Reform UK election victory? Or do you think it just smacks a bit of Tory 2.0? Because there's no Labour defectors here. And Nigel Farage said that he was coming after Labour voters. Remember when he promised that he was going to unveil a major Labour defector? Well, that was weeks and weeks and weeks ago. And we've heard nothing. So I want to get your reaction to this. Do you think Reform UK are a serious contender for government? There's been a few polls out in the last few days which have shown Reform UK anything between 24 and 30%. Now, if the YouGov one at 24% is accurate, I mean, that is quite a drop because I think they've been polling in YouGov at 28, 29% before. So, Aggie Chambray is here, a deputy political editor. What do you make of all of this? Because when any party leader announces their top team, and these are most of the top appointments, there's no shadow foreign secretary, which is a bit odd, isn't it? But it's a significant thing.
It's definitely a significant moment. I think it is worth pointing out, as you have, there is no shadow, it's not really shadow, but there is no would-be foreign secretary, there is no would-be defence secretary, nor any would-be health secretary. Obviously, he doesn't have enough MPs to create an entire sort of not-so-shadow cabinet by any sense. But it is strange because he notably did leave people off this list. There were only 4 people he introduced in this those sort of podiums behind him in this. It sort of came across a bit like a game show style press conference. You know, it was Nigel Farage picking his shadow cabinet. But he only had 4 people who he introduced with jobs. As you pointed out, we had Jenrick, Robert Jenrick, who only defected to Reform last month, of course, from the Conservatives. Then Suella Braverman, another Tory defector, Richard Tice, and Zia Youssef, who actually is not an MP. Yet, or what they would say yet. But this is what Nigel Farage said when he unveiled his not-so-shadow cabinet.
What you're seeing today is just a start, but a very important start, and 4 very competent, capable people who will take on these areas, do their own press events, travel around the United Kingdom, and you'll be seeing a lot more of all of them over the course of the coming days, weeks and months, and who knows, maybe a little bit less of me. We're certain that Britain is broken and that Britain needs reform. We're deadly serious about what we're doing. We are now the opposition to the Labour government, and we intend to campaign in even more seats than we thought this time yesterday as May the 7th approaches, which is our next big, very big landmark moment.
So we got a tiny bit of detail from these people who were introduced and made small speeches about what they would do. So Robert Jenrick talked about restoring stability to the economy, cutting waste, bringing down the benefit bill and reducing taxes. Suella Braverman, she's been given the education, skills and equalities policy, but she said reform would actually scrap the role of equalities minister. Sort of, she admitted doing
and
herself...
The Act.
Sorry?
And the Equalities Act.
And the Equalities Act, doing herself out of a role. And we had this news line about what Richard Tice would do in that new role combining business, trade and energy policy. Listen to him talking to our colleague Tom Swarbrick a couple of hours ago.
Would you now scrap the Department of Energy Security and Net Zero? £10 billion budget. Would you get rid of it?
Yes, it's gone. When we win the general election, that department will be gone. Energy will be coming into my department, and net zero will be for the dustbin.
And those tens of thousands of jobs, they would go to?
Which jobs are you referring to?
The people that work at the Department of Energy Security and Net Zero.
I'm sure those wonderful bureaucrats and civil servants will find some lovely other jobs elsewhere.
So, to that point of those other 5 MPs that didn't really get a mention, and is it awkward that Suella Braverman got education when she used to be Home Secretary, when she was actually in government, Home Secretary twice actually, and Zia Youssef isn't even an MP, and these 5 other MPs did seem to be overlooked. And Farage was asked about that, whether they might be upset about this, and he responded,
very simple. If people mess about, behave badly and are disloyal, they won't be here very long. We're not going to put up with it. We're not going to put up with it. We'll have our disagreements, of course we will. But we'll have those disagreements in private, behind closed doors, resolve our issues, resolve our disputes that naturally happen when any group of human beings come together. But, I won't tolerate it publicly. We haven't got time.
He's channeled Kenneth Williams there a bit. Stop messing about. But I thought that clip there undermined his message, saying, well, it's not all about me. I've got all of these big beasts that are going to take leading roles. And in that clip, he basically said, yes, step out of line and I'll come down on you like a ton of bricks. Now, I suppose any political leader is going to say that, but it did rather undermine the message of the whole event.
And the message of the whole event was supposed to be, we are no longer a one-man band. Look at, all of the people behind me. If I wasn't here, if I were to cease to exist one day, it would still exist without me. But there were moments in the press conference like, yes, that Exhibit A, but also Exhibit B when journalists asked questions and asked questions specifically to other people standing behind Nigel Farage. And Nigel Farage seemed to want to field a lot of those answers, which again slightly undermines the idea that he is no longer a one-man band.
Aggie, thank you very much indeed. Well, let's talk to Alex Wilson, who is a Reform UK member of the London Assembly. Alex, very good evening to you. What did you make of today's event? I don't know if you were there.
Good evening, Ian. Yes, I was there this morning, and I thought it was fantastic. It's really showing how the party is growing and starting to really put the sort of flesh on the bones of what we've been doing since the general election. We've been accused for far too long of being a one-man band with just Nigel. Now we've got some serious people in serious positions that will be speaking on those subjects for the party, on the media, in campaigning, and showing what the team will look like, and as we build that team towards the general election. Now, today was just the beginning, those 4 positions. Obviously, we haven't put anyone in as Shadow Secretary for Health, Transport or Foreign Secretary yet, but those will come in due course.
But isn't that because you actually haven't got the number of people to be able to do that? Because I remember saying about a year ago that I thought that the sign of Reform's imminent success will be when they can actually put forward a team and say, right, these are the people that will go into government. Now, you've unveiled 4 today, 5 if you include Lee Anderson as Chief Whip, which seems to have been ignored by many people. But it is a bit odd that you can't have one of the great offices of state represented, the Foreign Office, and also at a time when we know that defence is rapidly climbing up the political agenda, you haven't got a defence spokesperson. So a lot of people are going to say, well, it's all very well having 5, you actually need 25.
Yeah, and that will come in due course. So today was the first stage, and you know how Nigel's very good at doing these press conferences on a regular basis, keeping that profile in the national media and keeping people talking about us. And we'll do that in dribs and drabs as we build that team And there will be a very strong defence spokesman. There'll be a very strong foreign affairs spokesman as well. I don't know who it will be yet, but we'll look forward to finding out in due course.
There is a school of thought that says, hang on a minute, though, how can some of these people that you've announced today, particularly Suella Braverman and Robert Jenrick, the people who were responsible for the Boris wave, basically, how can you portray them as sort of something new when they and many other of your leading spokespeople are basically just recycled Tories, failed Tories, many people would say, Tory 2.0. That's not an attractive proposition to go to the electorate with, is it?
Well, look, we get criticised for not having experience of having held ministerial positions, and then when we bring people on who have held ministerial positions, we get criticised for that as well.
Welcome to the world of politics.
But what's important about those two names in particular, Robert Jenrick and Suella Braverman that you've mentioned, both of those resigned from the Conservative government because their cabinet colleagues at the time were not supporting them in doing what they wanted to be doing. So, everybody who's joined us from the Conservatives has got to hold up their hands and say, they got it wrong in government, the Conservatives got it wrong in government, admit that and show they want to do something about it. And they've got the skills, the experience, the knowledge to do that, having seen it from the other side of the table. But going forwards, and this is why the local elections coming up in just a few weeks' time are so important for us as a party, because in those elections we are going to be showcasing thousands of candidates right up and down the country, promoting our own homegrown talent as well. What we are as a party is a balance. We're bringing people in with real experience. We're promoting our own people with genuine passion and desire for change. And ultimately, that's what we need to do. We didn't win the last general election. Spoiler alert, we didn't win the last election. We only got 15% of the vote. To win the next election, we need to bring on board people who voted and were members of other parties. That's what we're doing. It's about building that broader platform so we're ready, battle ready, for the local elections in May and the general election whenever that may be.
Do you worry that in quite a few of the recent polls, the Reform share of the vote has actually gone down a bit? YouGov was 24% today, and most of the polls over the past few months, 6 months, 9 months, have all shown Reform on somewhere between 28 and 32. I mean, that is quite a decline. OK, it's one poll, I'll grant you that, and there are a couple of others that show Reform back at late 20s, very early 30s. But there does seem to be a little trend developing here.
Well, JL Partners poll came out today, put us back up on 31%. Techni came out on Friday, back up on 30%, up 2 since their previous poll in January. Look, you have to look at the polls in the round. Never get too excited by an individual poll that you think is looking too good, or like the YouGovs, looking a bit of an outlier at the other end of the spectrum. Look at the average. On average, we are leading by about 9 or 10%. We've been in the lead for nearly 230 opinion polls, winning council by-elections every week, gained over 100 seats in council by-elections since the general election. Over 60 of those have been since last May's local election. So both polling, which measures potential support, but also, crucially, real votes in real ballot boxes in real elections, week on week on week. Reform is gaining ground, is gaining seats, and is becoming the largest party. We've got the largest party membership, got another huge opportunity in May, especially with those extra 30 councils whose elections had been cancelled. Now they're back on. Another massive, massive opportunity for us to do very, very well. Heading into the last year's local elections, we were averaging about 25% in the polls. Since that victory in May last year, we've been averaging about 30. So we're looking to take that next step forward. Hopefully, May the 7th will give us that opportunity as well.
So if Nigel Farage picks up the phone to you in the next couple of weeks and says, Alex, we need you as part of our front bench team. You need to get out of that London Assembly. Which job would you like?
Well, I'd be very happy to serve in any capacity that is offered, but we haven't had that conversation yet. But my mind's always on.
Yeah, but you must have one job. I mean, I was always very clear. If I ever had got into politics, I wanted to be a transport minister. I mean, you must have something that you would like to do.
Well, there are certain areas that are of more interest than others, but no, it's not fair to say something like that live on.
Come on,
that call may or may not ever come. I can't do that, Iain. You know that.
I think you can, but you just choose not to. But Alex, thank you very much for joining us. That's Alex Wilson, Reform UK member of the London Assembly. Right, over to your calls in a moment. Do you think that this team is the one that Reform UK needs to win the next election? As a Reform UK member or supporter, do you find this the kind of team that you had envisaged when you first signed up to Reform UK? Or do you think that there is a little bit of a disadvantage in that virtually all of them are ex-Tories. I mean, I don't know what Zia Youssef's background is, whether he was in the Conservative Party before, but all of the others are ex-senior Tories. Richard Tice, although he was never an MP before joining Reform, he was touted as a London mayoral candidate. Was it last time or the time before? 0345 6060 973 is the number to call. It's 18 minutes past 7.
This is LBC.
Also a Conservative Party donor, so that makes a full set, really. Every single one of the people that Nigel Farage announced this morning is an ex-Tory. Now, the question that I'm asking you is this. All of this seems to be designed to show that Reform UK is no longer a one-man band, and it's a party that has more strength in depth than you might have thought of. But is it really? Farage, I think, undermined that argument in that clip that Aggie played, saying he wouldn't brook any dissent and that anybody that was causing trouble would be out on their ear. Now, it's quite clear that there's a lot of jealousy among the senior members of Reform UK that Robert Jenrick has become the Treasury spokesman, because Richard Tice wanted that, Zia Youssef wanted that, and Nigel Farage has given it to essentially a Johnny-come-lately. That's bound to create some friction within the ranks of Reform UK. Sola Braverman jumped ship really at the last minute. I mean, she was the latest one to do so, and yet he's given her a top job. I think she probably wanted something a bit more important. But he hasn't named a shadow defence spokesman or a shadow foreign affairs spokesman, which I think is a little odd. If you're unveiling your top team, why would you leave those two jobs out, or health as well? Harry is a first-time caller in Hornsey. Hello, Harry.
Hello, good evening. How are you doing?
Not too bad, thank you. What's your reaction to today?
I think my reaction is that it's just absolute nonsense. It's showing, as you posed the question, it is Tory 2.0. Someone like Sarah Braverman has barely scraped getting voted back in as an MP alone, let alone Anne was disgraced as a cabinet minister and was forced to resign.
Twice.
Twice, exactly. So I just feel like it's the same con that Nigel Farage has always given from the Brexit days, and his number one thing in power, which has always been to con the electorate into something that he purposely feels the one-man band, which he's trying to get away from. But he's doing the opposite by putting puppets in power, or supposedly in power. It's a mirage at the moment.
I mean, to be fair, I don't think you could describe any of those four people as puppets of Farage. They're all. I mean, I think they've all demonstrated that they are independently minded.
Even though I vehemently disagree with their politics, and I would have agreed with you in that they had their own independent-mindedness, I've seen by their actions of switching to Reform and going over to party Nigel Farage that they are completely independently minded, and they are just going with what the status quo, where they think they might gain power again.
Well, I don't disagree with that. I think that is certainly true in one or two of the cases. I think Richard Tice and Zia Youssef can be probably excused from that, but I think there are questions that both Sola Braverman and Robert Jenrick have to face on that, and indeed Nadhim Zahawi, who was trying to negotiate a peerage from the Conservatives only weeks before he defected. And he was seen as the most likely shadow foreign affairs spokesman, but for whatever reason, Nigel Farage hasn't given it to him.
He hasn't given it to him. I don't know why. Maybe that's too far for Nigel Farage at the moment. But at the moment, it just seems to be going. It seems to be going one way. Nigel Farage has one or two major kind of ponds that he will sell to people as a kind of snake salesman, and when that doesn't work, he's just getting in kind of backward politicians that have failed that will go along with his.
But I mean,
mantra.
From what you've said, you're never likely to be a Reform voter. I mean, the interesting thing is going to be if we get calls from people who are swing voters, who are fed up with Labour, fed up with the Conservatives, but look at this team and think, well, hang on a minute, this is just the same old faces again. And I don't know whether we're likely to get more people saying that or saying, no, actually, I quite like this.
Well, I would say the latter. I think that I think that's the problem. I'd admit, throughout time, I would be naturally towards Labour as a voting member, but I wouldn't say right now that I'm openly supportive of what's going on in the country. I don't think it's brilliant. I'm not going to try and sell that to anyone.
But you are precisely the person that he wants to attract. He said in terms only a few months ago that he.
The opposite. I don't think he is even a political proponent or someone that represents anything other than absolute nonsense, and that's been proven over and over again. And we go back to what he fundamentally became. I suppose an icon for, if that's probably not the right word or terminology, but Brexit being the big thing, and it was the big lie. He has sold the country down the path, and over again, there has been nothing proven. And I also feel that a lot of the media. I know that you get a lot of callers calling in and saying, the media don't put, do this, do that. But at the same time, he has not been given the kind of critical opposition to what he deserves, in my view.
Well, it's not the media's role to provide opposition to Nigel Farage. It's the media's role to scrutinise what he says. And I really don't think you can accuse the media of not doing that.
But I don't think they do scrutinise him. He's been wrong about everything. So now, all of a sudden,
in your opinion.
Well, it might be. Well, it's not. It's actually factually.
No, it's your opinion. It's not a fact. It's your opinion that he's been wrong about everything.
Well, factually, the country is not in a very good position. That it's not.
He's not been in government.
But he's not been in government, and that's another thing that I would argue against. Is that the thing he can say what he wants, and that is a typical. Someone proposing to be in a member of parliament. They can say whatever they want because there's no check and balance against what they say.
Well, there is. Every time. Sorry, Harry, you're talking rubbish. Every time Nigel Farage or one of his spokespeople come on this radio station, they're held to account by the people that are interviewing them. The same that goes through for Ed Davey. The same goes for Zach Polanski, who'll be on this programme for an hour tomorrow night at 7. So you can't accuse the media of not holding Reform people to account for the views that they have. Sarah Pocham was on this programme last week, and she certainly was held to account for some of her views.
But they don't. I've never heard Nigel Farage held truly to account because he doesn't answer the question. So he will not oppose. If it ever gets tricky for him, if it ever gets factual, he will just he'll get aggressive.
All right, let me give you a statistic. How many questions do you think? Well, I'll tell you. Nigel Farage has answered questions from the media at press conferences 430 times. I think it's this year. Keir Starmer has done, I think, 130, and Kemi Badenoch 122. So you cannot accuse the media of not holding Nigel Farage to account.
But why has he been asked that many questions? He's got
because he puts himself up for scrutiny in the way that the others don't so much.
He doesn't really put himself up to scrutiny. He might. What is your statistic to answering a question? Because I'm not.
He holds press conferences 2 or 3 times a week, which is more than the others do. So, I mean, if that isn't putting yourself up for scrutiny, I do not know what is.
But to get an article in the Daily Mail that will write and say that whatever he's answered is wonderful and cause a conversation again on Monday morning. It's not real issues. It's not real politics. Everything he's saying or answering, he might answer a question.
But you can say the same for Keir Starmer.
I'm not a massive proponent of Keir Starmer, but I do. One thing I will give him is I think it's sensible. It might be boring. It might be painful for all of us that have to listen to the chopping and changing, etc. But I think it's genuine in comparison to someone that has made their career on chatting absolute rubbish and conning people.
In your view, I mean, I don't agree with everything that Nigel Farage says, but I'm somebody who, if I agree with him, like I did on the cancelling the elections, I will say I agree with him. And if I disagree with him, as I do on most of his immigration views, I will also say I disagree with him. I'm fed up with the kind of politics where you can only see good in one politician and bad in another. Most of them have a mixture of good and bad, and Nigel Farage is no different.
Completely agree with you most of the time, but I would disagree. No, I would disagree with you on someone like Nigel Farage, though. I think he is in it for one reason only. It's for himself, and that he has been a proven snake oil salesman in every single issue on the wider issues, and why he's in politics in the first place in this country, and he is about to con the country again. Hopefully not. But that's where I see it going.
Well, if you believe that voters are incredibly stupid and thick and can't see through the type of politician you're describing him as, well, I'm sorry that's the view that you have of the British electorate. I think the British electorate can see through what you describe as snake oil salesmen, but we will see. Harry, thank you very much. Paul says, Ian, it's obvious that Farage thinks that there is no talent in reform, only Tory rejects. Well, I can see why you say that, but of course you could counter that to say, well, of course, any new party is going to have people who've defected from other parties. I think the big mistake that he's making is, having said he wanted to attract lots of Labour supporters and Labour politicians, he hasn't got any at the top of the party, so he can't give them top jobs. And I think that's his challenge now. If between now and the May elections he can attract 2 or 3 really good Labour names over, well, I think it would be game on. I'll admit that. We'll come to more of your calls in a moment, and we'll get the latest on the Iranian-American nuclear talks, which seem to have made some sort of breakthrough. We'll find out more about that in a moment. It's 7:31 on LBC. Matt Hewitt has the news headlines.
Barack Obama says
Dale, text 84850. This is LBC.
7:34 on LBC. Let me tell you who's on Cross Question at 8. We have Ben Bradley, who's Reform UK's head of local government delivery, former Conservative MP and county council leader. Yasmin Alabai-Brown, author and political commentator. She's just won an award for Commentator of the Year. Gillian Keegan, former Conservative cabinet minister, and Luke Taylor, Liberal Democrat MP for Sutton and Cheam. He's the party spokesperson for London. So they will be here after 8 answering your questions. Now, before we go back to your calls on reform, Iran and the United States have reached an understanding on guiding principles after fresh talks on Tehran's nuclear capabilities in Geneva, according to Iran's foreign minister. Abbas Araghchi said that while an agreement may not be reached soon, the path has started. The US side says while progress was made, there are still a lot of details to discuss. Well, not least the comments from Ayatollah Khomeini today, who threatened to sink American carriers in the Gulf, which rather goes against the progress that seems to be made in Geneva. Let's have a word with Fred Fleitz, who is Vice Chair of the America First Policy Institute Centre for American Security and a former Chief of Staff to the National Security Council under the first Trump administration. Fred, very good evening to you. Very, very conflicting words coming from Geneva and indeed the Ayatollah.
Indeed. Look, the Iranians are expert at creating the impression of progress when really nothing's been agreed to. I believe President Trump wants to at least go through the motions of diplomacy before he uses military force. But it seems very clear the Iranians are not seriously interested in negotiating. They only want to talk about their nuclear program, but will not give up uranium enrichment. They won't talk about their missile program. They won't promise to stop killing their people. And with these threats by the Ayatollah today, an effort to partially close the Strait of Hormuz by Iran, I'm afraid military conflict is probably inevitable.
So why is America even bothering to take part in these talks?
That's a good question. And it's pretty clear that Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu disagrees with this approach, but this is sort of a hallmark of President Trump's America First approach to U.S. national security, that he wants to exhaust all tools of statecraft short of military force before we go to war. And I think that's what we're doing right now.
You sound to me as if you think that some sort of military action is going to be inevitable in the long run. There are people who think that, well, it's a shame that hasn't happened already because yet again, the Iranian people feel let down that having gone out on the streets, more than 50,000 of them having been killed, no one's come to their rescue, just as no one came to their rescue, 15, 20 years ago.
I think that intervening militarily will be complicated. I think we have to recognize that even if the administration decides to bomb various sites in Iran, we can't bomb away the Ayatollah. It will take a long-term strategy of standing with the Iranian people. I think Trump has a strategy in mind, and I don't think he's sending an additional carrier group to the region for no reason.
Give me your predictions. Look into your crystal ball and say what is going to happen in the next 6 months in these discussions, in this whole scenario.
I think there's going to be an effort to target Iranian nuclear missile sites that were not destroyed last June. I believe sites affiliated with security forces that are cracking down against the Iranian people will be hit heavily. And I'm hoping that the U.S. and its allies will do other things short of war, put up large payments to Iranian officials to defect or reward Iranian military officials who refuse to fire on demonstrators or otherwise kill or torture demonstrators. And we have to make it clear to any Iranian involved in these atrocities that they will be put on trial for war crimes.
Fred, thank you very much indeed. That's Fred Fleitz there, Vice Chairman of the America First Policy Institute Centre for American Security. Right, back to your calls on what Nigel Farage announced today, his new top team. Well, 4 members of them anyway. Leslie says, respectfully, it is not a nitpicky thing. Sorry, that's a reference to something I said at the beginning of the hour where I sort of said I was not going to refer to this top team as Shadow Chancellor or Shadow Home Secretary because constitutionally, there is only one Shadow Chancellor. That is Mel Stride for the Conservatives, because they are the official opposition. Anyway, Leslie continues, calling it is something it isn't is a massive deal. They're trying to legitimise themselves as something they are not. Well, this is not anything new, Leslie. The Liberal Democrats have been past masters at this. She continues. Or he continues, I'm not sure which it is. It is disingenuous and all their pants are on fire. They're all liars who like to stay relevant, and in order to do that, they need to stay in the news and have people like you discussing it and giving it presence. There are so many other things we could talk about, like why Farage is in the Epstein files, for example. We've done that to death over the last few weeks. Farage is in the Epstein files. 40 times he's in the Epstein files. Everybody who's looked through those mentions can find no evidence of wrongdoing by Nigel Farage. So that's why we're not talking about that tonight, because it would be a bit boring, frankly. And this is news that he's unveiled his top team. That's why we're talking about it with no apologies whatsoever. John is in Luton. Hello, John.
Hello there. Hi. There's just one gaping problem reform I've got, just illustrated by meeting a couple of friends of mine last week, and they were all dead keen on voting reform. They might as well have been in the conference, and they said to me, we're not voting reform anymore. And I said, why? He said, have you seen the number of Tories that are joining them? The last thing we want is a hospice for the Conservative Party.
A hospice? Well, I'm going to use that. That's a very good phrase.
Yeah. I mean, I said, what do you mean by that? I said, look at the age. Well, and then the interesting this is they said, I'm very curious about Green, and I've looked at the odds for Green winning the Gorton Denton by-election, very important, 2 to 5 on. They're almost certainly going to wipe reform off in Manchester. So that's going to cause a real...
Your friends are going from Reform to Green?
Well, a lot of people, Ian, are so confused, including me. I'll be honest, Ian, I have no clue who to vote for now. I have no clue. You give me all the selection, I just think, I don't know who to vote for. People are going from one extreme to the other. And we talked about reform being far right, and Green is switching to the left. But the Green communication is amazing. Listen, I watched the young people. Young people listening to their political broadcast. It's dynamic, exciting, and that's why they're going to win the Gorton and Denton in Manchester. And what happened then? Then Reform will realise, crumbs, we've got competition from an unknown foe.
Well, I don't disagree with your analysis there. I've said right from the beginning that I think it's possible that the Greens could win that by-election, which would be I mean, if Reform won it, it would be a bit of a political earthquake. But if the Greens won it, I think it would be a double political earthquake in many ways. And you may have heard Zach Polanski is going to be on this programme this time tomorrow for this hour, taking calls from listeners. And I think whatever you think of a lot of the policies that he's espousing, I mean, personally, I think a lot of them are absolutely barking mad. But he's been a brilliant salesman for the Greens.
Yeah, he has. But he's a great communicator, and young people. He's actually getting young people once again. Watch the number of young people who voted to Gorton. I guarantee it's going to be unusually high. But those sort of odds are like, Arsenal playing Sheffield Wednesday or something like that. You just don't. So I'm seriously off the record. Don't tell my partner, but I'm going to pop down with £1,000.
No.
Oh, go on.
No. I mean, I never bet on politics because I regard it as insider trading if I did. But a tenner maybe, but you can't bet £1,000.
I know. But my friends who said they were voting Reform, that's really significant. They just said, I thought it was going to be new, and now it's a Conservative. That's a big problem Nigel Farage has got.
Well, I'll tell you what, if you do put that bet on, and you win, or indeed if you lose, I want you to call me the week after Gorton and Denton and tell me how you feel, one way or the other. Wow. John, thank you. Nick says, blimey, Iain, Jenrick and Braverman, if that doesn't unite the left, nothing will. Anthony is in Ashford. Anthony, hi.
Oh, good evening, Iain. Yes, sorry I haven't spoken to you for quite a while, but it's nice to speak to you. About this clown show today, it reminds me very much of the circus, and I have sort of, in my mind, a circular firing squad sometime in the future, because what happens when you put a lot of Tories together, what they do, they want to assassinate each other, don't they? I'm surprised.
It has been known.
Yeah, that's right. And of course, the chief assassin was the one that was very prominent today, and that's not Farage, that is Jenrick, who was constantly plotting to get into number 10. And obviously, he's considerably younger than the other candidates, Tice and Farage. The only thing he's going to have his eye on, if Farage gets into number 10, is number 10. The other thing is, it reminds me a lot of people of a certain age will remember the Sheffield Rally. Remember Neil Kinnock?
Yes.
We're all right.
We're all right.
Yeah. It's always a bit of a dangerous thing when you put yourself forward as the next Prime Minister. I think it was Glenda Jackson, the next Prime Minister. And, of course, it didn't go too well.
But you see, I do remember watching that live and thinking to myself, how old would I have been then? About 30. I remember thinking, this is amazing. It's really impressive. Why can't the Conservatives do this? And then, of course, everyone blamed that rally for Labour taking it all for granted and then losing on election night. I think it was more complicated than that.
Yeah, the other thing is that someone has been keeping in the background for quite some time is the ultimate clown in chief. That's Boris. And I wonder what will happen if Boris decides to come back in the scene at the next general election. What will that do to Farage's hopes?
Do you know, I saw an interview with Boris a couple of days ago. I think it was on some Scandinavian channel. How can I put this politely?
Yeah.
He didn't look well. He had porked up to a massive extent.
Yeah.
Sorry, my work producers are thinking I shouldn't be talking about people's appearance. His hair was even more all over the place than it ever was. Yeah. And I'm thinking, you're spending too much time on your own. You need to get out there, get fit. And I mean, I don't know whether he can ever really come back. I'm not really sure he can. And I'm not sure Kemi Badenoch would welcome him back.
You know, never say never with Boris. I do agree with your comments, and I hope he is well. He just looked a little bit out of condition. I did see that, yes. But perhaps that was the Boris that people liked, the portly Boris.
Well, it's possible. Thank you very much, Anthony. Shrivan is in Hemel Hempstead. Hello, Shrivan.
Hello, good evening, Iain. Iain, we must all get together, hold our hands and say hallelujah to the new shiny team of reform. It's an absolute joke, and I'll explain to you why. This reform with the new lineup, with the two, what did you say, Johnny-come-latelys?
Yeah.
The two Johnny-come-latelys, they think we are idiots. They think the electorate is idiots, and I'll explain to you why. Today's showing of the new reform top team is actually symptomatic of the decline of British politics since the days of the self-abusing King Clown Johnson, and explain why. Last year, in the Byline Times, the Public Affairs Committee statistics were published, and they said the three Home Ministers, Braverman, Jenrick and the pretty useless Patel were solely responsible for letting 1 million plus unchecked migration into this country. And the irony is they are now Jenrick and Braverman, the two named in that report, along with useless Patel, they are in the reform, which is the single obsession.
Yes, but of course they say that they resigned on principle because they weren't allowed to implement the policies that they wanted to.
I don't believe that, Ian. I don't believe that. This is the irony. This shows how decline of the British politics has become. Honestly, it's a joke. They are solely responsible. Jenrick and Braverman are solely responsible for letting so much immigration, 1 million plus unchecked, and they are standing with a single obsessive issue party.
Well, to be fair, it wasn't 1 million plus unchecked. Some of those were illegal asylum seekers that came in, but the vast majority of that 1 million were here perfectly legally.
That's right. They can check on Byline Times. I'm quoting you from.
Yeah, that's not a source that I would regard as a reliable one.
No, but some of your colleagues quote it very...
I'm sure they do, but you won't find me quoting Byline Times.
Okay, fair enough. But I just wanted to say, to me, it's a completely irony and shows just yet another decline. And your previous callers have called it Tory 2.0, and I agree with that.
Okay.
It's Tory 2.0.
Siobhan, thank you very much indeed. Baz says, I really hope Reform win. And when they mess up, I want to see how you all report on it. You watch and they will sell us to Russia. Thank you, says Baz. Well, if they do get in, I very much hope that they would not sell us to Russia. That would be appalling. And I will report on them just as I will report on anybody else. If they mess up, I'll criticise them. If they do something that is good and I agree with, I'll praise them for it. That's exactly what I think we should all do. Shouldn't we? 7:48.
On the latest episode of The Newsagents.
The royal family and the police. Have they got too close? Is the relation...
Is LBC with Iain Dale. Call 0345 6060 973.
7:51 on LBC. David says, Ian, that shadow cabinet, in inverted commas, is a bad joke. I don't want Braverman and Jenrick. Farage has spent years slagging Tories, and that... I think the word off should have been in there somewhere. And now is welcoming failed ones. Who wants that? I think this winter will be seen to be when Reform started to blow it. I mean, there is nothing inevitable about the rise or fall of any political party. No political party has a right to exist. No political party has a right to be top of the polls. They've got to earn that position. And I think Reform have probably done that in a way that the other opposition parties haven't managed to over the past 18 months or so. They've certainly taken the fight to Labour. I think the Conservatives are starting to fight back now. And it's interesting to note that in the recent polls, the Conservatives have gone up a couple of points. So have Labour, actually, which is an interesting phenomenon in itself. Let's take this next one. This is from Neville, who says, I was absolutely disgusted to hear Dale. You always know it's going to be bad when someone just calls you by your surname, don't you? I was absolutely disgusted to hear Dale discussing the risibly self-styled Reform shadow team in such a conciliatory manner. I actually said they shouldn't call themselves a shadow team because it's constitutionally inappropriate. How is that being conciliatory at all? He obviously cannot bring himself to call out those self-serving charlatans for what they really are. Well, I suggest that you go back and listen to this hour because any of you that have listened to this programme in the past will know that I have absolute contempt for Robert Jenrick. Suella Braverman, I've said some terrible things about her on this programme in the past. Richard Tice, I have a lot of time for, actually. I think he's a genuine person. I think Zia Yusuf, somebody I've never interviewed, I've never met, but I've been very impressed by his communication skills. So it's 2-2. If you regard that as conciliatory, well, fair enough. But as I said, if they do or say things that I think are right, I will say so. And if they say things or do things that are wrong, I will also say so. I think that's what you'd surely want from someone in my position, rather than me sitting here and just taking the view that Harry did. Well, they're all bad, they're all clowns, they're all horrible, they're all nonsense. Well, that's not going to get anyone very far. Or if I sit here and say, Well, Nigel Farage is the best thing since sliced bread. I don't know why more people aren't supporting him. I mean, that would be a ludicrous position for me to take, and I don't believe either of those things. So I'll call it as I see it, and if you don't like it, there are plenty of other people you can listen to, frankly. Let's go to Adrian in Lewisham. Hello, Adrian.
Yeah, hi there. I think one thing Farage is doing rather well is distracting by putting all these names up front, many of whom are, at least they have brand recognition. If it's not good, even if it's not good brand recognition, it's distracting from what they're actually doing right now in local government. We're supposed to be about to vote about local government, not national government. And if we look at his record in so many places, it's just a complete failure of promise. He said he would cut taxes. In nearly every council where they got in, they're actually going to increase taxes, in some by the maximum possible amount. There were ludicrous suggestions he would get rid of all DEI posts. When he went to Lincolnshire, he was going to sack all the DEI people, only to find there weren't any. And therefore, he just didn't even bother to do any homework. He just made these bland promises. If you remember, we were going to have a tax-free up to 20%, 20,000. Clearly, utterly unaffordable. And even a basic look at a calculator would have stopped that. And we've got these disruptive things now. We had Cornwall, where the leader quit, and they couldn't replace him with a deputy leader because the deputy leader had also quit. These nice personalities coming out are distracting from his awful record so far in local government and his complete abandonment of the promises he made, not because he wanted to abandon them, because he hadn't done any homework at all, hadn't a clue how to run government, and then suddenly finds that these promises are just utter vaporware. So I think, great to have some personalities out there. Personally, I don't admire those personalities much. I would say they are from the government that, why did you get rid of the Tories? Because the reason you got rid of the Tories is whatever it was, but they're the same people that you got rid of for their 14 years of failure. But again, to me, it's great. It's quite clever from him to wheel out some more personalities. I agree with you, by the way. No Labour, what a shame. But I would want people to think about local government and find out what he's done in local government, because these are local government elections. That would be we should all think like that, but frankly, people don't think like that in local elections. They vote for whoever they think is popular or they approve of in the national scene at the time. If I may, which is his big deal has always been immigration, right? His big deal has always been immigration. There's a more than remote possibility that next year we may see net emigration. Now, we've got the Tories to thank for that to some degree, because they brought in the policy that said, no, you cannot bring your family with you when you come into study and so forth. They did a good thing there. But it will be interesting to see what Farage says if suddenly we find that net emigration is either a tenth of what it was just 2 or 3 years ago, or is indeed... whether net immigration is either a tenth of what it was just 2 or 3 years ago, or is indeed zero and negative.
Well, he would claim credit for it.
And if I were Labour or the government in time, what I would say is, because the next thing they're going to say, of course, is all the people leaving are the wrong ones. They're all rich people going to live in Dubai. Whereas I suspect if we do have net emigration, a lot of them will simply be returning families and so forth. So again, bearing in mind that's been his however many years, 10 years of campaigning ace. If that one is suddenly simply not there, it'll be interesting to see what more fantasy lines he comes up with.
I think if we do have net emigration, I think you're right, we may well do over the next couple of years. I think that will be a really, really bad sign for our economy, because I've always said that the levels of immigration are determined by the needs of the economy. And if our economy doesn't need immigrants, then you draw your own conclusions.
That doesn't quite stack, if I may just say one thing, which is one of the big reasons was students allowed, and I think hundreds of thousands of students, I'm not sure, are allowed to bring their relatives in. If it is in fact the students and their relatives returning home, I agree with you, by the way, on emigration.
I don't think that I think that is part of it, but I think it's only a small part.
Well, I agree with you, by the way, that immigration is often a positive, because it brings people who've had the courage, for that matter, and the determination to actually come here, or for that matter, they felt they can contribute. So, like yourself, I'm a fan of controlled immigration. But again, bearing in mind it's been Farage's ace card all these years, it'll be really interesting to see what happens if his ace card is no longer in the pack to be played.
Thank you very much indeed, Adrian. Luke says, Iain, not your fault, but why did your producers only put through anti-reform voters? Everyone I've spoken to today is very impressed with today's announcement. Well, the reason that only anti-reform voters have been put through is because we haven't had a single pro-reform call. I mean, it's as simple as that. You can't manufacture these calls. If they aren't there, you can't put them through. I've read out a couple of texts, but there were no pro-reform callers. So reform voters of the world unite. Give us a call. You can do so in the next hour because we are going to convene our cross-question panel for Tuesday. We have with us award-winning columnist Yasmin Alibhai-Brown, author and political commentator, Gillian Keegan, former Conservative Cabinet Minister, Luke Taylor, Liberal Democrat MP for Sutton and Cheam, who's the party spokesman for London, and Ben Bradley, Reform UK's head of local government delivery, former Conservative MP and county council leader. 0345 6060 973 is the number to call if you'd like to ask our panel a question. You can WhatsApp on that number, you can text 84850, and of course you can watch us on Global.
Lows tonight between -4 and 8 Celsius. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Daisy Steele.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Iain Dale.
Hello, very good evening to you. It's 8 on LBC. I'm Iain Dale. Welcome to Cross Question. On the panel with me tonight, Gillian Keegan, former Conservative Education Secretary. Next to her is Luke Taylor, Liberal Democrat MP for Sutton and Cheam, and he speaks for the party on London. To my right, award-winning columnist and author Yasmin Alibhai-Brown, who she just told me has been nominated for yet another award. Honestly, it's been greedy. Ben Bradley is Reform UK's head of local government delivery, former Conservative MP and county council leader. And the number to call to ask your questions to our panel is 0345 6060 973.
Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Cross Question. Watch live on both Global Player and the new LBC app. This is LBC.
Right, let's go to our first question. It's from Scott in West Hampstead. Scott, hi, what would you like to ask?
Hello, Iain. Good evening, panel. Is Nigel Farage's shiny new front bench lineup, just revealed today, likely to attract more people to vote for Reform UK? But having just said that, are Ladbrokes also right to suggest, as they said on their X post today, that Reform UK are no longer favourites to win most seats at the next general election? Who's right?
OK, so the question is Nigel Farage's shiny new front bench, just revealed today, likely to attract more people who do to vote for Reform UK? And what about the fact that the polls seem to be going slightly, not all of them, but some of them slightly in the opposite direction? Ben Bradley, shiny new front bench made full of old Tories.
Well, some of them.
Well, all of them.
Step.
All of them.
Not formally, not elected ones. But is there?
Well, Zia Youssef was a former Tory donor. Richard Tice nearly stood for the Tories for London Mayor, so I think we can include them.
But look, it's demonstrative of the shift in the country, isn't it? I used to represent an area called Mansfield that voted Labour for 100 years and then voted Conservative and feels let down by the Conservative Party. Lots of those people, I would put my money on it. That seat will go Reform at the next election. Politics has changed.
Are you going to stand for it?
I don't know. Not my choice. But politics have changed a lot. I think the front bench announcements today are a really important step because actually there has been that criticism, is Reform just a one-man band? Is it just about Nigel? Well, no. We've got those experienced voices. We've got people who are now able to engage in a different level of detail in serious national politics and to be able to set out that stall for the future. I hope that will attract people to come and vote for us because we're able to demonstrate in the coming months and years that we are a serious opposition force and that we've got significant plans for the way we would change the country.
But two of the senior appointments, Robert Jenrick and Suella Braverman, they were in charge of the Home Office when the Boris wave happened. They failed as ministers. They both, one was sacked, one resigned. They're just sort of Tory retreads, aren't they?
I think they would both strongly argue and have strongly argued that they tried to make a case in government that wasn't accepted and they weren't able to deliver, and therefore they sat and Suella sat and was very critical of that on the
if they
backbench.
couldn't persuade Rishi Sunak, how can they persuade the British people?
I think it's the nature of the different political alignment, isn't it? And you've seen over many, many years the Conservative Party consistently promised to reduce immigration at every election and consistently failed to deliver that. Reform will go into that election with a different mandate, with a new direction and a new directive from the British people to enact that promise. And Suella and Rob are amongst the most committed people I've met to delivering that.
I could insert a very cruel joke there, using the word committed. But anyway, Luke.
An incarnation.
Yeah, I think, and Scott...
Are you laughing there? Why?
I am, because this shiny new concept is ridiculous. These guys have gone out, they bought a new colour tie, and they're telling us that they've learned from their experience. And Ben gives the example of his area being let down by the Conservatives, which was him, and now let down by Labour, which I'd agree with. But asking the same people, the same Robert Jenrick who cheered on Liz Truss's budget, to now come and fix the mess that he created is astonishing. People see through it. I think that's why the polls are dropping for reform. They know that they've been figured out, and it's just I think the public are better than that.
But why don't the public turn to your party? Because you're sort of languishing at 12-13% in the polls. The Greens are overtaking you in every single poll at the moment. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't really reflect very well on the Lib Dems, does it?
Well, it doesn't reflect reality either, because if you look last year in council by-elections, we won more. But the ballot box is a more reliable poller than
it's a long time ago.
Well, last year in 2025, we won more council by-elections than any other party, including Reform. So when people are asked who they want to represent them on their local council, I was down in Tunbridge Wells last May, electing Liberal Democrats for you, sir, to help you on your local council, and it was a pleasure to knock on those doors. But what people are saying when they're asked is Liberal Democrats, and that's what we're seeing in the council by-elections. And I'm really excited that now we're going to have we had another U-turn from the government. We're going to have a chance to elect more Liberal Democrats in May.
Okay, Yasmin.
Well, I never thought I'd sit next to the real embodiment of all of this reform fantasy, but nice to meet you. Very nice to meet you.
You fulfilled a fantasy.
But, one of the things is, I just don't buy into this. But don't you think, as your own leader has previously said, if somebody jumps ship and joins another party, they should stand for election? If these guys who are actually the dead end of the Tory party, some of them truly obnoxious, like the chap you call Rob, shouldn't they stand for reform? Because what kind of a democracy is it that you are one kind of MP representing one party, you've said whatever you've said, done whatever, and then suddenly you jump ship and reinvent yourself?
Yasmin, that's happened down the years.
Yeah, but I think we've all said that is such a democratic failure, and Nigel Farage himself has said it.
And of course, there were UKIP MP. I mean, if you remember Douglas Carswell and Mark Reckless, they did put themselves up for election in a by-election.
It's not something I've ever called for. But ultimately, I mean, constitutionally, that's not how our democracy works. You vote for an individual to represent your area. That's the system that we have, like it or lump it. But as Nigel said today at the press conference, actually, time is pressing, right? We've got to make a case here for an election that, given the chaos in government currently, could happen very quickly.
It's what Nigel called for. When it suited him, Nigel called for it, like he called for proportional representation, and now he's suddenly changed his mind.
It's very unfair on the constituents. If this is your new shiny party, test it. Because they didn't vote for you. They did not vote for you.
Rob is my MP, actually, in Newark. And a lot
Would you say, Robert? I mean, I do find it very uncomfortable that you're talking about it as your best friend.
Bob, isn't it?
No, honestly. Nige, Rob. Oh, yeah, in your policy.
I don't go as far as Nige. I think that's pushing it.
Well, he's called Ben.
But that is his name, I think. I don't think you are Bernard or whatever.
You can do full formal names if you like. I don't think I'm in trouble yet.
But all I'm saying is those constituents didn't vote for reform.
All the polling suggests that they would.
No. Polls are different.
OK, right. Gillian, you've been very patient.
Yeah, I am very patient. But politics has certainly got more interesting, but it's also got less serious. Will this shiny new cabinet, well, it's not shiny and not new, obviously that's sarcasm in the question, but is it going to attract more people to vote for reform? I doubt it, because I don't think people are voting for reform in a positive way. I think it is a protest vote, it's a negative vote, it's people who are really concerned about immigration, with good reason. So if you let's imagine we solve the immigration problem before the next election. And there are some signs, actually, that all the things that we put in place...
Well, the call we had in the last hour said we may be heading for net emigration.
Well, when all the things we put in place at the end of the last Conservative government, and of course we had loads of lawfare, that was thrown our way as we tried to solve and grapple with this issue. But we did put some things in place, and let's imagine this is solved. Then I actually do not know whether people will know what they're voting for with reform, because they have policies that are... There is incoherent, in fact, more incoherent than Liz Truss's budget. They've got big tax cuts in. They've got nationalising half.
Did you vote for that?
No, I didn't. I didn't vote for her either. I mean, literally, Liz Truss's. I mean, to be honest, she would have done all right if she hadn't have added 150 billion about 2 days before in bailing out the energy cuts. I mean, that's what made it incoherent without any savings. But if you look at reform and some of the things, they haven't announced everything, but some of the things they've said they want to do, increases in welfare, nationalise lots of things, half nationalise many things, they all cost a lot of money. Then there's tax cuts. I don't know where this comes from.
Are they going to save money by privatising the NHS?
Well, Doge apparently is which that's what you're doing, Ben, right? You're the UK Doge. But as we all know, whilst you can save money, and there is definitely things, if you look and pinpoint back to 2019, just before the pandemic, and look at things, the rise in the number of people in the civil service, or the rise in the welfare bill, or the rise in other things which are inefficiencies, it's reasonable to try and get back to them. But that is not enough to pay for all of these things.
What do you make of the fact that Conservatives like Ben have gone over to reform? I mean, Robert Jenrick is one case, Suella Braverman's another. I was actually genuinely shocked when you moved over, because I've always seen you as a sort of fairly moderate voice in the Conservative Party. And I don't think the Conservative Party can afford to lose people like you. What was your reaction when you saw that his...
I was very sad that Ben and I went in together. We were friends. We did lots... It's the first time I've seen him since, and I called him treacherous something. And we'll move on. But the reality is... I am a cynical Scouser, and when I look at some of this, and Ben will obviously will reject what I say, but I look at some of the people who've gone, and I think, right, you want to go to the Lords, you want to get your old seat back, you think that's going to be more popular there, and maybe I'm just a cynical Scouser, but I can see a reason for every single one of them.
What was his reason, though?
His seat would probably vote for reform, the one that he had last time. And he's very good friends with Lee.
Lee is a good friend of mine.
Yeah.
But,
so he's been listening to Lee a lot, I guess.
Lee didn't get a job, though, did he?
He did, Chief Whip.
He's still Chief Whip. Okay.
Look, I don't even know if I'm going to stand in the next election. The reason I got involved, I have no idea. And whether I stand for Parliament or I stand for something else, I don't know. I've got young kids, I've got all sorts of things to balance in that equation. I genuinely couldn't tell you. But actually, the reason that I joined Reform is totally different. I was working out of the Conservative Party. I left the Conservative Party actually a good year ago, and was working in a non-political job, which were in a fascinating project that was really enjoyable, really nice, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, seeing my kids, it was lovely. But actually, politics is addictive. And all of the things that were frustrations and all the challenges and all the things that the government come out with that just make you want to shout at the telly, I didn't feel that I could just sit back and not get involved in. I love that stuff. Particularly, Wes Streeting announced the puberty blocker trial for 10-year-olds, and it just made me go crazy. And I'm like, how can I sit and not get involved in this? And currently, although I love Kemi to bits, currently, we did a lot of work on that particular issue. Currently, the party that most represents my views on most of those issues is Reform. When I sat in the last general election, I think Rob said something very similar. Rob Jenrick said something very similar when he joined, that when I sat, and if I took my Conservative MP hat off in the last election and looked at the two manifestos, I would have voted Reform. And that's an honest reflection of my opinion.
Yasmin.
Including lifting the two-child benefit cap.
Sorry, Robert Jenrick is Mr. Overambition. He's so full of himself and so full of overestimates himself. He jumped because he thinks that's where he'll get, to be what he thinks he should be. And the very idea, actually, I'm quite offended, sitting here as the only immigrant on this panel, that all the time we are discussed as a problem. Okay? I am 50 years on, it has been going on since 1948, if you read your history. And it never goes away. It's never good enough. I think when the last one of us dies or leaves, maybe this country will stop talking about us as a problem. Mm-hmm. And it's time some other politicians and other political forces, I don't want you to say, oh, look what they contribute, which we do, but actually talk about us in a different way. I am heartily sick.
Why do you think it is? I mean, it's slightly going off the subject of this question, but since you've raised it, why do you think it is that politicians, I would say of all parties actually, are just so reluctant to explain what the benefits of immigration are?
I think that's unfair. I think there are people who really want to grasp the metal here. I think the Lib Democrats talk about the huge benefit that immigrants make to not only our culture but our workforce as well. The reality is, I went to an event, and actually, Ben, you might be interested, it was a nuclear power event, where we had speakers talking about the huge gaps in our workforce that we're not going to be able to fill, and we might talk about it with apprenticeships. We're not going to fill with our existing workforce, but we're going to need to rely on the huge skills from people around the world to come and do those jobs that are going to allow us to make the green transition. And we have to be absolutely clear and proud of that. We need to attract people here to use their skills and to boost our economy and give us the growth that we're going to need to get out of the mess that the Tories left us and our Labour are failing to solve.
Every time you talk about it, exactly what Luke said, no one has a problem with. Nobody has a problem with high-skilled immigration. I was the Education Secretary. Nobody had a problem with students. We have 350,000 international students.
Care workers?
Absolutely. Care workers. The numbers that came in, and I put that visa in place, and the reason I put that visa in place was because we had 15-hour queues outside A&E, and if you say to people, would you rather have the 15-hour queues or open the care worker visa, which we did, and we brought in care workers after the pandemic, because we couldn't discharge people from hospital because there was literally not enough care packages. If you break down, even the Boris wave that people talk about, if you break down each one of those, we had Ukraine, Hong Kong, Syria, care workers, we had heavy goods vehicles drivers because the supermarket shelves were empty. There was a number of them, and they all added up to quite a large number.
It's the only time I admired your party.
Right, but
the only time, because actually,
well, that's at least it's one more than I've admired yours. So there you go. But
she hasn't got one.
Well, okay, I thought you were Labour.
No, I'm not.
But
I'm not.
But the thing about the immigration debate, where it has shifted, not just in our country, across many countries, is because of the growing pressure, first of all, the illegal migration, the very visible illegal migration, and then the growing pressure because people look and see lots and lots of economic migration that may be forced by whether it's economic conditions, whether it's war, whether it's climate change. You know, people are very concerned about the numbers. And if you look at the numbers, and here Ben is correct, everybody says, yes, we're going to keep it down because the overall numbers have gone up a lot in the last 20 years.
I think
that's all of those things together.
Right. It's been a numbers debate since 1948. Okay, and it doesn't stop.
I wasn't around then, but
you can read about it.
But I don't remember being a numbers debate when I was growing up.
All the time, every hour. We need to discuss immigration. You've done nothing else since the war, at the end of the war. I will send you books to show you this, Ben. Inform yourself. There's a book by
the numbers have gone up
Henry,
about 20 million in the last
how many years. And I think it's time to treat us as fellow citizens and not always make us feel outsiders.
We did. I mean, that's why we got 4.5 million settled status.
I'm getting racism today.
Fully welcomed.
It had become better. You know, for a long time, in the 2000, things became so much better. We all felt so comfortable with each other. Then Nigel Farage creates a new politics of division, and I'm going to say it.
For our problem.
Nigel Farage has not created the immigration issue.
I'd love to do this for the rest of the programme, but it is 21 minutes past 8, which is 6 minutes past the time I should have gone to break. Yasmin, you diverted us. No, not at all. You're here to talk. It is 21 minutes past 8 here on LBC.
This is LBC.
8:23 on LBC. We have with us in the studio Ben Bradley, former Conservative MP, now Reform UK's head of local government delivery. Yasmin Alabai-Brown, author and political commentator. What award did you win?
I won
Commentator of the Year.
Society of Editors.
Get you.
And now it's the Press Awards.
Does it mean an awful lot to win an award?
It meant a lot to me because I'm writing and talking against the grain, as you just heard. Right? I'm on the left. I'm 76 years old.
No, you're not.
I am. That's what I said when they gave me the award. That was the only word that tumbled out of my mouth. I said, hey, guys, thanks. I'm 76 years old. Well, how would I not love it?
No age discrimination. In fact, no other discrimination in the awards sessions anyway. Gillian Keegan, former Conservative Cabinet Minister. Have you ever won an award?
Yeah, I did. I won, I think, a Spectator Award when I swore on television.
Oh, no, we all remember that marvellous moment.
Yeah.
Luke Taylor.
That's the only time.
I can ask you, either have you won an award or have you ever sworn on
I
television?
swear far too much.
Not on this
when we were
programme,
practising press lines, I kept getting telling off, you can't say that, you can't say that.
OK, right, let's go to another question. Kimberly says, unemployment is at basically a 5-year high and 1 million young people are NEETs in this country, not in education, employment or training. Is this the impact of 14 years of the Tories or Rachel Reeves's budgets? Well, I think we can predict what one or two panellists are going to say. I'm going to predict, Luke, that you're going to say both.
Well, I think the crisis in young people primarily comes from hospitality and retail. It's where most people get their first starts in the employment market. We've seen Labour's NICS increases, their lack of reform of business rates really impact hiring in those areas. So I think it's Labour that have made the problem worse. But let's not ignore the huge bin fire that was left by the previous Conservative government. And that's not only in the economy, it's in the impacts of Brexit, where young people were denied the ability to move and work around Europe. So that's why the Lib Democrats have called for the youth mobility scheme to give people the opportunity, young people the opportunity to work around Europe and get that experience, which is so difficult to gain. We've also called for the government to reverse the NICS increase. And we've also called for business rates reform so that our high streets can thrive. And the specific one that we called for before Christmas was a 5% cut in VAT on hospitality. That puts more money in your pocket so that when people go out, they spend more. There's a really incredible business on my high street.
You've done what you accuse Reform of doing in coming up with all various things which will cost the government or the taxpayer a huge amount of money.
Well, a youth mobility
but you've got to. Well, no, that doesn't. But all the other things you said do. If you cut 5% off VAT for hospitality, what will that cost?
It boosts the high street. It means that businesses don't.
How much does it cost?
It gives you more money in your pocket.
If you don't know how much it costs.
It gives you more money in your pocket to spend on your high street. It keeps businesses
there would be an initial
Lounge
cost.
Sutton, who tell us more people are coming out to gigs, but they're spending less on the bar. If you keep those businesses open, they continue to pay business rates. They continue to be able to afford their power bills. They keep employing people. I mean, we forget about the benefits of employment. We forget about the benefits of that experience.
OK, well, if you're not going to give me a figure on how much 5% of VAT would cost, what about putting the national insurance level back to where it was? That inevitably is going to...
strangling of growth.
Well, of course, yes, I get that. But there will be an initial cost to the Treasury. How much would that be?
It's not about the costs. It's about the benefits of the growth. If we can't grow the economy, nothing benefits. We have two growth-killing budgets that have meant that businesses are not hiring young people.
But the government has to balance its books. And if you can't tell me any of the costs of the things that you made, then you can't be taken seriously.
They're schemes to boost that growth, and we see the increase in income for the economy. For the youth mobility scheme, that gives us that experience. I mean, we talked about the customs union, 25 billion to the exchequer from a customs union with the European Union to gain that trade and to cut the red tape.
Are you looking forward to telling all of the people at Jaguar Land Rover who would lose their jobs if you went into a European Union customs union?
Why would they lose their jobs?
Well, because the fact that we've got a trade deal with America has kept their jobs. We wouldn't have that trade deal anymore.
The tariffs on the vehicles that are going to be here this week, there next week, there next week.
But we have a lower tariff than the EU.
The US is huge. They're not a reliable.
Gillian.
I think Luke's proven he needs to do a bit more work in this area, and that's not to be patronising, but the reality
it was so.
Yeah, all right, it is, because I mean, we've seen what happened when people who don't know what they're doing do the wrong thing. We've saw that in the last two budgets. If you said, no, actually on employment, we did a good job on employment, and we managed to largely keep employment not stable. It did go up a bit, but during the pandemic, when we closed down the global economy for 2 years, and we did a lot of work, and I was in government then, to make sure, not just furlough, but to make sure that we did have training still going on, young people being able to get jobs. We did all kinds of things like Kickstart. So no, I don't accept that. That if you look at the facts, you will see that what we inherited and what we left, we had basically improved employment, and unemployment was much lower than it is now, and youth unemployment was lower than it is now. It's the highest that it's been in a decade, and the reason is because they have done all the things that have choked the growth in the economy. If you said to me, what are the worst things to do? Raise business rates, raise taxes, and raise the cost of employment. That is effectively what they've done. And now the question will come back, and Keir Starmer says this every week, if you didn't want to do that, what would you have done instead? And the Conservatives say very clearly, we would have taken more off the welfare bill, not to be unfair, but to take it back to where it was before the pandemic, which was a reasonable place, and actually had grown as well, because we did have a lot more mental health even then. But that is the answer to the question. So what we've got is employment, and when you find it happens, you lose a generation. I lived in Spain when they had 50% youth unemployment, and I'll never forget it, because the kids in our blocks of flats, they couldn't get jobs for years, and it scarred a whole generation. It was so sad to see. So what they have to do now is make sure that these young people get an opportunity. So I would introduce something like similar to the Kickstart scheme, obviously the pre-apprenticeships and more apprenticeships, which is a lot of what we put focus on all the time we were in government, because we created that whole apprenticeship system and 4 million people were trained as a result of it.
Yasmin.
Well, it's wonderful to hear all these party political speeches, but actually I worked in the university sector. Besides being a journalist for 10 years until 24, I worked at a university, and it was a university where it was, I would say 90% were first time in the family to come to university, which is partly why I went there. And the policies that the Tories, Brexit most of all, meant two things. A huge percentage of our student population left, because that was the effect of Brexit. And then the secondary issue was so many young lecturers who had their first and second jobs there were sacked. So I don't think you can glorify your record on employment all that much.
We have 350,000 international students come every single year. We have 35 billion it is to our economy, international education, and we are one of the leading international education providers in the world.
But they left after Brexit. I'm telling you, all the European Union students left en masse.
But it was broadened out. So maybe although there's many come from Europe, and I don't know which university it was, but we also broadened out to appeal to global students across the world. And obviously Brexit was something that was voted for by the British people. It wasn't a policy that,
we can't go into that.
But it was voted for by the British people.
No, let's not. Let's hear from Ben.
Was delivered, though.
Well, I think it's a combination of all sorts of things. Clearly, the economy dropped off a cliff after Rachel Reeves' budget, and clearly you can see in the unemployment figures, youth unemployment figures in particular, the impact that that's had. It's not a surprise to anybody that if you make it more risky to employ people and you make it more attractive to be out of work than in work, then less people are going to be in work. Nobody has adapted to the challenges of the modern age, mental health, the number of people off sick with low-level anxiety type issues. These are things we have to tackle. I think the last conversation actually exemplifies the longer-term challenge and the way that the system is just wired up wrong to support people at the same time as you've got record levels of youth unemployment, record levels of graduate unemployment. You've got massive skill shortages in other sectors. We were talking in the break about engineering and welders for major infrastructure projects, where you cannot get people for love nor money. The short-term fix for countless governments over decades has been, well, import some. Immigration is the opportunity. But you've left thousands and millions of young people without the skills to get into the job market.
That's not
at
fair,
the same
Ben.
time. It's being propped up by temporary
the apprenticeship scheme we put in place, which has access now all across the country to more than 700 occupations. Yes, we still need to grow and make sure many more people get them all over the country. But you can get to pretty much every occupation in this country now via an apprenticeship. Obviously, we need to work to make sure they're available all across the country, and as many are as needed.
Okay, right, we're running late. We're running late again, and that's my fault for not disciplining you all, I'm afraid. I'm a very bad disciplinarian. It's 8:33, news headlines with Daisy Steele.
Barack Obama's paid tribute to...
On LBC, call 0345 6060 973.
8:36, just to reassure Yasmin that she has fans. Jenny in Carmarthen says, lovely to see my favourite panellist on again tonight. Yasmin always speaks sense. Always?
Yes.
Yes, obviously. Yes, sorry. Right, Gillian Keegan is here, former Conservative Education Secretary. Ben Bradley, Reform UK's Head of Local Government Delivery. And Luke Taylor, Liberal Democrat MP for Sutton and Cheam. He speaks for the party on London. Right, a text question from Tim. Phone theft in London is down 12% according to figures released today. Does this begin to put paid to the idea that London is a crime-infested hellhole like Ben's colleagues often like to peddle? That's Tim's words, not mine. Yasmin, you live in London. Have you ever had your phone stolen?
No, mine is so old that a thief would not want one of my phone. Well, my phone. No.
Are we to read anything into these figures?
Yes, I think a lot of crime figures recently have really revealed either the lies or the misconceptions of what the whole country actually... Some crimes have gone up, but actually, on the whole, we've got a much more positive picture than for a long time. And I think we should be happy.
So you don't think that you're living in a crime-infested hellhole?
Oh, no, God, no, I love London. No, I've never felt that. Now, it could happen tomorrow. You know, I could get burgled, attacked. I have been attacked twice physically, both by racists. But never.
But you don't feel unsafe when you're walking about London?
After those incidents, I did for a while.
Would be
but
anyone
no, I don't.
Okay.
I really don't.
Right, spokesperson for the Liberal Democrats for London, Luke Taylor, the floor is yours.
Absolutely, right in my wheelhouse. Well, I saw Nadeem Zahawi scared of a tired man the other night, which was ridiculous. I think that feeds into the right-wing reform. He saw a tired man on the street and he had to cross the road because he was scared. A tired man, yeah, looked like he hadn't slept all night. I think this was on this channel. Well, yeah, there you go. So I think that feeds into this right-wing madness about London being a crime-ridden hellhole, as you said, which is just completely nonsense. It's one of the safest cities in the world. Now, that being said, total crimes in London has increased from 87 to, I think it's 106 per 100,000 people over the last decade, and that is a worrying trend. We have seen
quite
the murder
a rise.
rate. It is. It's about 10% rise. We've seen the murder rate reduce, and I think Sadiq Khan's very proud of that, and I think does say a lot of positive things for London. This reduction or this crackdown on phone theft is really great news, and it's an example of when the Met Police can deliver. But there was some figures that were released recently where there's going to be 2,503 fewer officers on the streets of London, on the Metropolitan Police, in the 2 years since Sadiq Khan was elected. And that shows a downward trend, and that shows there's fewer people out there, fewer officers out there making Londoners feel safe. And that's where Labour letting London down. It's where the government are not backing the mayor and providing the funding for the Met Police. And it means we will have fewer results like this, fewer investigations of phone theft, fewer investigations of the e-bikers who snatched them. And that's a worrying trend. Like, London is the safest city in the world, but we need to keep it that way.
Can I congratulate you on your use of the word fewer, because many people in your position keep saying less,
it was entirely
which is wrong. Ben?
Look, I think it's a huge challenge. I think there is a real kind of sense around London, and I certainly get the sense that I feel less safe in London than I do in other parts of the country. I think it's just a fact, and public's perception of that is really important. Certain crimes have gone down, but others have gone up. There are fewer police in London. And actually, I have, not personally, but all sorts of examples from my staff in particular, when I was an MP, walking home late at night, who were regularly harassed and stalked, and in a couple of cases had phones stolen and other things, walking back or travelling back on the tube to their homes. So had that first-hand experience. I don't think it's unreasonable, particularly given the nature of the crimes that you now see, to say that things have changed in a negative way. I have never seen before the last couple of years people in broad daylight taking sledgehammers to shop windows, and the kinds of scenes that people see on social media now that everything is on a smartphone.
Social media is a big thing about
perception. The kinds of crimes that you're seeing that leads people to absolutely fear.
Big cities have always had crime problems and always will do. It's just part of being a city. I mean, you used to be head of Nottinghamshire County Council. In Nottingham, I don't know whether it still does, but it was known as the gun crime capital of the country. I mean, I don't know what's been done about that, but if I was in Nottingham, I'd probably feel less safe than I do in London.
Mm-hmm. Well, thankfully, I ran the very successful county council rather than the very bankrupt city council, so you'd have to ask them about that one. But I think there is I spend a lot of time in Nottingham. I like Nottingham, and I don't get the sense walking around Nottingham that I do around London. Maybe it is a perception thing, but I certainly look at the figures.
It is a perception thing.
Well, you look at. I've got a Guardian article in front of me.
But perception matters. Let's not forget that.
Says violent crime was up 31%
personal safety
last year. So there is a genuine rise in the numbers of crimes that concern people in that way. It's all well and good to say Nadine was concerned about somebody who looked dodgy on the other side of the street, but people do walk past groups of lads who look a bit dodgy and think, God, am I going to get myself in trouble?
Sorry, this is just reform propaganda. I've been in London for 50 years. I've raised children in London. Okay, and we have never, ever, except for these racist incidents that I've suffered, it has been, our daughter used to come walk home at 12 o'clock at night. And we don't live in a very posh area. We live in just a suburb, on the edges of the suburbs of London. And I feel that, I have felt it in Nottingham, where I have a friend who lives there. I have felt it in various other parts of the country. But I don't feel it in London. That might be because you're familiar with the place.
Right, let's move on to another subject so we can squeeze that in before the break. Paul
I didn't get to speak on that. Can I just say there was a lot of anecdotes and there was a lot of, just comparing figures. And if it's happened to you, it's real. And if it hasn't, then it hasn't. And you're lucky.
I've had a phone taken out of my hand by people on a sort of moped.
And if it's happened, it's real. And the figures, people bandy around the figures, but actually it's reported. It's always reported theft. And one of the things that we also need to make sure is people are reporting crimes. And that can actually mix with the figures as much as anything. It's good news that they're going down. But of course, until you're getting crime to the level that everybody does feel safe or feels safer in their communities, then there's still more work to do.
Violent crime up 40% is a huge problem.
Is that reported crime?
Well, the Guardian's figures, violent crime up by 40%.
Knife crime has been a big issue, and I think a lot of
that's coming down.
It has come down in the last year, but it's certainly, if it's happened again in your school, you're still concerned about it.
Okay, actually, let's go to a break now, and then we'll have more time in the last part of the programme. It's 8:44.
LBC. Question with Iain Dale on LBC.
8:46. I've just shown our panel the fun question, which you're all going to like this because they can have a bit of a go at me. Right, we have with us Ben Bradley, Yasmin Alibaya-Brown, Gillian Keegan and Luke Taylor. Paul is in Twickenham. Hello, Paul.
Good evening, Ian. Good evening, panel. My question is, which political party, in your opinion, comes closest in spirit to the humanitarian ideals of the late Reverend Jesse Jackson?
Now, the US civil rights leader died at the age of 84 yesterday. Former President Barack Obama said Jackson was a true giant and he stood on his shoulders in becoming America's first black president. I interviewed Jesse Jackson a few times. It was usually on the most diabolical mobile phone signal, I have to say, and I can't remember anything that we talked about, which I'm slightly ashamed of now. Yasmin, I think you met him.
I met him very briefly once. He came to the university where I was teaching before COVID, it must have been. A colleague of mine invited him who knew him. And he had a presence. He was much older than the fiery days which we remember from the television. But he had such integrity and he held on to so much that has now vanished from the earth, actually, almost everywhere. The idea that justice matters, that you treat human, and it's very Christian, of course. It's like Martin Luther King.
He was almost a preacher, wasn't he?
Yeah, foundation was Christianity. good Christianity, right? And you could listen to him because he made it compulsive. He was an amazing guy.
So which party is the nearest in spirit to his ideals, do you think?
I think the nearest at the moment, from the words, has to be the Green Party.
And Zach Polansky will be here for an hour tomorrow from 7 to take calls. Ben,
I do like the Lib Dems. I do. But I think the kind of way they're speaking is the kind of way that I think Jesse Jackson spoke.
Okay, Ben.
Zach Polansky is an extremist, to be honest.
Oh, God.
The idea that inclusivity is making drugs available to everybody is absolutely incredible. It scares me, to be honest, that level of extremism in mainstream politics. I would never I would never try to compare reform to Jesse Jackson, because I imagine that can only end with me getting in trouble in one way or another.
Well, with the person to your left.
I will, with lots of people, I imagine. But I do think the civil rights conversation has changed beyond recognition since those days, and we are in a really regressive place, actually, in that discussion. You look at the degradation of all sorts of rights, of women's rights in particular, in the modern day kind of debate of the... I've spoken for a long time in Parliament, and Suella mentioned it today in her education speech about the negative impact, actually, of the Equality Act and how it's embedded prejudice in our institutions, actually, through so-called positive action, positive discrimination, that is backwards. Actually, we've gone so far backwards from some of those debates that it needs a real radical reset, I think, if we're going to really have honest and fair meritocracy in this country again.
Let me just give you a bit of information. No, I have to say this. Legally, there's been no positive discrimination in this country. So please get your facts.
They called it something else.
No. We have no positive discrimination. America does. America has
examples?
Affirmative action. We
What's
never
the difference
did.
between that and positive action?
They have, but we've not had anything like affirmative action. No, we have not. Please check the law before you spout off, please. I know it's the reform. Yes, there is no positive discrimination. The only thing you can do, say with employment, is you can expand the pool of people you invite to interviews.
So the armed forces have never put out adverts that specifically excluded white people?
My God, they're not doing that.
They have.
They have.
It's done.
They have actually.
It's been done.
Anyway,
it's positive,
listen.
That's positive action.
We've got a lot to get through.
That's not
nothing to do with.
We'll call it something else.
Gillian.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I think that conversation actually proved that probably no party has got to the level where they need to get to. And I think as a country, as Ben says, we probably have gone backwards to some degree, and we do need to create the space. And actually, unfortunately, the shift of the whole discussion about migration has really have covered a lot of, has made a lot of people feel uncomfortable. But I would just cautiously say to Yasmin, the words in politics mean nothing. And Zach Polansky's words are almost certainly not implementable, and most of them should not be implemented in our country.
Luke?
I'm not going to get into politics on this at all. I think we can talk about Jesse Jackson's integrity. I think he's an incredible figure, was an incredible figure, and I think both American politics particularly, but also our own, can learn a little bit of the lessons of his level of integrity and maybe try and reflect upon itself.
Thank you very much. Right, let's go to Nick in Windsor. Nick, by the way, Paul, thank you for that. Let's speak to Nick.
Good evening, Ian.
Hi.
Good evening. My question is, why are so many young people leaving for Dubai and making the great escape? And I like myself, I'm quite a young person. I'm desperate to get out of the UK. And if National Fire Department's listening, any chance of a job?
Why are you desperate to get out of the UK? It's one of the greatest countries in the world.
We've got, we are the greatest country in the world, but it's the fact that we get 40% of my earnings are lost. I'm paying 20% VAT, and I've got very little to pay my mortgage left, and I see greater opportunities elsewhere.
I find that incredibly sad, and I think Nick is representative of a lot of people in this country who seem to have been talked into thinking that this country is somehow not the land of opportunity, which I still think it is for young people. Luke?
I worked in Dubai for about a year and in the wider Middle East a lot when I was before I was elected in engineering. I always was based in the United Kingdom, so I still pay my taxes, but I can see the attraction of working in the Middle East. It's incredibly low tax, it's high quality of living, but at every moment you are aware that your standard of living is built on the backs of millions of immigrants who are being brutally and horribly exploited. So I think when Brits are attracted by these overseas areas and overseas opportunities, you do need to pick under the surface and see the brutal exploitation that is going on, because your low tax is being paid for by someone.
Gillian?
Countries around the world compete for skilled workers, young people, with their tax rates, with ways to attract them. So there's some countries that have gone out of their way. Dubai has, Portugal, Milan. You've seen increases, Singapore. You've seen increases in number of people who are emigrating to there. And that is why, when we look at our own economy, we need to make sure that even though words like non-doms, it sounds very popular, tax the rich, squeeze them till the pips squeak, etc., etc. The result is most people think, actually, if I move over here, they will tax me less and I'll be able to keep more of my income. So you've always got to look internationally for your economy to be successful, whether it's businesses investing, people staying, or people paying their taxes here.
You've done a lot of travelling since you've left Parliament. Mm-hmm. Which country that you've been to do you think would offer young Brits the best opportunities?
Well, I think many countries do. I mean, I've worked in Tokyo. I worked in Madrid for 8 years. I've lived and worked all over the world. If you have the skills, you're very mobile, and you look for the jobs, you look for the job opportunities. I mean, I wasn't looking to escape the country. I went for positive reasons, for jobs. Many countries, but you also do see. Lots of countries where the level of employment is poor, the salaries are low, the living standards are much lower. And one of the things you see you feel when you work abroad a lot is it gives you a real love for your country, because literally it is the best country in the world.
Ben?
I think there are far too many perverse incentives in this country that make people feel that way. And actually, we've talked about the high levels of youth unemployment, and at the same time we're constraining businesses' opportunities and to create jobs and employ those people. It's no surprise they go and seek opportunities elsewhere. As Gillian said, if you are a skilled, qualified person, you can go wherever you like, and we've got to do more to make sure that we are creating the kinds of roles and the kinds of opportunities that people want to take in the UK. I'll give you an example in medicine where we train lots of doctors and then we cap the number that can go and work in the system. Shock, horror, they go and work somewhere else in the world. We can't afford to do it. And there are fundamental barriers in our system that make people feel like they can't access the opportunities here, sadly, that they want to. That's been going on for a long time. And, they used to say, everyone wants to go and live in Australia because it's sunny. Actually, the Middle East is the new destination, isn't it, for people who feel that they want to have those opportunities, want to live in that kind of affluent lifestyle. There are all sorts of challenges to that other panellists have described. But the way that we tackle that is by making it more attractive to live and work and pay your taxes here, and people will stay.
Yasmin?
I just want to say, isn't it ironic that when white Britons want to go to Dubai, and some brown ones do, we're all giving us such a wonderful story. They want better opportunities, life chances. Oh, yes, but we must keep them here. Actually, it would be and I'm very pleased that you've raised the point that underneath Dubai's, and I'm very impressed, or not, that Isabel Oakeshott, is living in Dubai, having. How many years has she spent attacking migrants? And she's now herself a migrant, a queenly one in Dubai, which is a ghastly place as far as I'm concerned. And I'd never go there.
Imagine that's ghastly.
It's just ghastly. It is so materialistic.
But why do so many people go there?
Because it is the life of the influencer, if you like, made real.
Yeah. OK, right. Antonia says, does your panel agree with Jeremy King, founder of the Ivy restaurant chain, that camera-wielding customers are ruining restaurants? Put your phone away, stop taking pictures and eat your blooming food, says Antonia. The restaurateur claims he's hit... Doesn't make sense. He's hit out at entitled influencers who he says sometimes arrive with suitcases full of different outfits and coordinate photo shoots, even in the lavatories. Right, 30 seconds each. Gillian?
Well, you've got to wonder whether this influencer model's getting saturated now. I mean, literally everywhere. How many pictures of food can you see? We're all supposed to be going on diets, and that no wonder Manjaro's going up, because we're all looking at food day in, day out. But I think... it's ridiculous. And in fact, this whole fake lifestyle in a way that you see, on Instagram, etc., is worrying and is difficult for people to cope with.
Totally agree. Put your phones down, turn them off. Respect the food and the waiters and the cooks and the people around you.
Ben?
Certainly rule of law in our house, no phones at the dinner table, we don't do it. It's a time for conversation, isn't it? You'd like to think that people in restaurants might do the same.
Well, not having a table.
Well, yeah, quite. The one that does my head in is where people stop in like the tube station or the supermarket and they're filming things and they get annoyed when you get in their way of their important filming. I think people are in a difficult place when it comes to social media addiction.
Luke?
I might be to blame for some of this. I think I've trained my Facebook algorithm to give me videos of people eating fried chicken. So at some point I've watched too many of these videos and now I'm just full
Step
of...
away from
and
the
I watch
chicken.
them all. No, but I watch them though. They're cracking. I'm watching restaurants around London being
Maybe
reviewed.
that's it. Maybe you watch it instead of eating it.
I just need to
Is
stop
that what
it.
people are doing?
So I'm sorry, everyone.
OK. Julie has our so-called fun question. Iain Dale today was banned from driving for 6 months, or so I read in the Daily Mail. Could you ask your panel, are they good drivers? What makes a good driver? Ben?
I have to say I'm a good driver because my dad is a police advanced driving instructor and has been for a long time. So if I'm not a good driver, I'll be in big trouble. I do pretty consistently have kind of a rumbling 3 points on my licence at all times, which has cost me a fortune in insurance.
Well, at least you don't have 12.
But I haven't been banned, Ian, that is quiet. I read in the Daily Mail, which is always very, very accurate.
It's funny, when I came out of Crawley Magistrates Court this morning, I walked out and there was this guy with a sort of video camera and I thought, oh, here we go. I said, who are you? He said, I'm the court reporter. And I thought, oh, I can just see this in the Daily Mail. Sure enough, 3 o'clock this afternoon, there's this massively long argument, the article, and it only got 5 things wrong. But there we are.
You're not bitter about it?
No, I'm not bitter.
I'm
In fact,
really
I quite enjoyed
delighted.
it. You're delighted?
Yes.
Why?
Because it kind of, humility for you is a very important virtue, and from time to time...
I'm full of it. And humility.
I don't.
Gillian.
Well,
your husband's a very good driver because he gave me a lift once.
He gave you a lift when we thought you were going to lose your licence last time, and what I'm surprised is after that you actually got away with it, and then I was cleared.
You
were cleared. Sorry,
only because the police witness didn't show up.
You were cleared, and then you went on to do it again. So, what makes a good driver, and what I recommend for you, is cruise control.
Yeah. I should use it more.
Yeah.
I'm more of a cyclist, and so I think what makes a good driver is somebody who's aware of other people on the road. So I spend most of my time watching out for bad drivers. So I think when I'm in the car, I'm just a little bit more aware of who's around me. So I think that's the answer. More cycling.
Well, there we go. Thank you all very much indeed. On tomorrow's panel, we have the former US Ambassador Kim Darroch, a Gogglebox star and Labour campaigner Josh Tapper, former Tory MP Anna Firth, and political commentator Anita Boateng. Now, coming up in the next hour, we're going to return to one of the questions that we talked about earlier on unemployment. It's gone up to a 5-year high of 5.2%. I think it's only going one way as well. So I want to ask you in this hour, do you fear for your own job? Because we hear all about these jobs that are under threat from AI. I think it's much more difficult for young people to maintain their jobs, to get into the workplace. The minimum wage has gone up to such a level, including for young people, that it's unaffordable for many hospitality industries to employ them. And I wonder if you had to 5 minutes past 9 on LBC. Welcome to the programme if you've just joined us for our 9 o'clock hour. Now, unemployment in the UK has risen to 5.2%, the highest level in nearly 5 years, while wage growth continues to slow, which raises the prospect of another cut in interest rates in the spring. Well, nobody's going to object to a cut in interest rates, are they? But there seems to me to be a very, very worrying trends in all sorts of different parts of the economy. And the unemployment rate, I think, is one of those trends that I think is only going to go in one way. And there are all sorts of different reasons for that. You can't just blame one thing that the government either has done or hasn't done. I think there are many contributing factors to this, not least the continuing development of AI, which I think threatens all sorts of jobs throughout the economy, not just white-collar jobs either. Well, the Office for National Statistics calculated this 5.2% in the 3 months to the end of December. It's the highest rate since the quarter to January 2021, which, of course, was when COVID was thriving. And this is in line with an expected increase from the previous month. Now, joblessness has steadily risen since 2022, so you can't say it is all down to a Labour government because they've only been in power since July 2024. It was gradually going up under the Conservatives as well. So what is causing it? And what is likely to happen over the next year? I want to know if you yourself feel that your job could be under threat. Are you working in a sector where there have been quite a few job losses? Do you feel that technology is threatening your job? And if so, is there a little voice in the back of your head that is telling you that you might need to retrain over the next few years? Doesn't matter whether you're 21, 41 or 61. I'm 63 and I'm thinking, well, if I left LBC this year, I suppose I could think, well, should I even look for another job at the age of 63? Because I think there's a hell of a lot of discrimination in the job market for older people. I think 63 is probably a bit too late to retrain, but never say never. But are you even thinking about that? Is it something you don't even want to think about? You kind of know that at some point you might have to do this because your job might become redundant because of AI, but you kind of want to put it to the back of your mind. You're behaving a bit like an ostrich. I think there are a lot of people in that position. 0345 6060 973. Liam Halligan joins us, economist and Telegraph columnist and author of the When the Facts Change Substack. Liam, welcome again. Good to have you on the show. How have we got to this point where unemployment seems to be on an upward curve?
Good to be with you, Ian. Look, unemployment isn't where it was when we were kids back in the early 80s. Remember the UB40 song, 1 in 10, when 10% of the UK workforce was unemployed. The number out today is still pretty shocking, though. It's 5.2%, which is a 5-year high. And it's up from 4.1% when Labour took office in the summer of 2024. So it is up quite steeply. Why is it happening? I think there are two reasons it's happening. One is that there's not much growth around. Companies aren't investing. There's a kind of general downer on the economy. So firms don't want to hire people. But just when firms' appetite for hiring people is coming off the boil, it's becoming much more expensive to hire people. We saw the big increase in employer national insurance under the Labour Party, not just the increase in the rate of employer national insurance, but the increase in the threshold so firms are paying national insurance when they employ people, anyone that earns more than $5,000 a year, which isn't very much. That's a kind of student's wage. And then also we've seen big increases in the minimum wage, particularly for youngsters. And I think this is the real headline from today. 5.2% unemployment at 5-year high is enough of a headline, but an 11-year high for youth unemployment, over 16%, now at, continental European levels of youth unemployment. And that's because it's a lot more expensive to employ youngsters with a massive 16% increase in the minimum wage for youngsters. This is ministers thinking they're doing good by just yanking up the minimum wage.
Well, it's the law of unintended consequences, isn't it?
What they don't understand is that, each job for youngsters is often, somebody running a small business thinking I'm going to take a punt on someone who's 18, even though I'm going to have to train them for a few months. Well, if you make them just as expensive as somebody in their mid-20s, they're not going to get a look in. And that is the real tragedy of these numbers today. I wouldn't say that unemployment is up at kind of late 80s levels, but I do think we're now on the cusp of a youth unemployment pandemic.
So there's no reason for anyone to feel optimistic that, say, in a year, 2 years' time, we can have another conversation and unemployment will be on the way down?
Well, I wouldn't say that. There are signs of growth in the economy. There are signs of investment. I think the rate of increase of unemployment has leveled off, though that's no consolation for people who've recently lost their jobs, who are finding it really hard to get jobs. We're not seeing an acceleration of unemployment in the UK at the moment, but it is still at pretty high levels. I think everything stems from growth. If we can get the economy moving, then a lot of these labour market issues will become a lot less important because there'll just be more work around. I mean, talk to young people, Iain, as I know you do on your show and in your life generally. It is really difficult to get a training position. It's difficult to get a job. A lot of the professional services companies aren't taking nearly as many people on. And then in your intro, you rightly mentioned AI. A lot of those entry-level clerical jobs are now being done with artificial intelligence. Companies are starting to get their head around how to use artificial intelligence. It's just a kind of historic irony, though, just as artificial intelligence is coming in and becoming cheap enough for companies to experiment with and use, it turns out that the government's making it particularly expensive to employ people. This is not the right thing to do. We should be making it as easy as we can for companies to employ people. And as well as, a lot of this started under the Tories, but as well as the increase in national insurance we've had under Labour and those inflation-busting increases in the minimum wage, particularly for youngsters, of course, we've also got the Employment Rights Bill, which again is making those small and medium-sized enterprises, Iain, which employ 2/3 of our people in this country, it's making them more wary about taking people on.
Liam, thank you very much indeed. That's Liam Halligan there. His Substack is When the Facts Change. Right. Now, the founder of Pimlico Plumbers, Charlie Mullins, told LBC's Sheila Fogarty earlier that more white-collar workers should be retraining.
Look, I think it's going to be a case of dirty hands versus clean hands. And if people are not prepared to get their hands dirty, then they're going to be out of work. And I don't really see them having a future because obviously the AI is going to be doing away with so much that we would normally do manually. Why would someone go to university now knowing in 4 years when they get their degree there won't be a job for them? I mean, why are they not doing an apprenticeship, a skilled trade where we know you're not going to be out of work? Surely we should be directing youngsters now down to that route, come away from clean hands, get dirty hands and, get a proper manual job. Universities are just a business. All they want is bums on seats.
Well, joining us now is a man who's done just that. Steve Moss worked in corporate jobs for 35 years, most recently as an HR director, but has retrained as a plumber. Though I think HR director, that term doesn't exist anymore, isn't it? Chief People Officer, they're all called now, Steve.
It's all sorts. It was personnel director when I started, yes, so that's aging me a bit.
So you took the plunge to retrain as a plumber. Take us through that experience. What sure. prompted you to do it?
Sure. I mean, I was made redundant. That was the start of it. I spent probably about a year looking for other jobs of a similar sort of type, getting not very far at all. But what really struck me was that with maybe a couple of exceptions, while I was, obviously not particularly happy to be turned down for these jobs, actually there were very few of them where I was thinking, yeah, I'd really like to have done that. It was more just the sort of personal pride blow. And that was sort of telling me, yeah, maybe actually doing something different. I've done this for a while. Try something else, something completely different.
And was the thought in your head that the AI was going to take over a lot of the kind of executive jobs that maybe you were used to, so you wanted to sort of insulate yourself against that in a way?
I'd love to say that, yes, I saw all this coming, but the truth is I didn't. At the time, it was mentioned occasionally, but not really at all. Whereas now, and this is only like, as I say, couple of years on, every conversation I have with somebody about what I've done, somebody gets on to say, well, yeah, that's an AI-proof profession.
So how old were you when you decided to do something different?
So I would have been 56 at that point. Yeah, 56.
And how long did it take? I mean, why did you highlight on plumbing?
It was a suggestion of my son, actually. He came up with various ideas, and this was one of them, and I didn't dismiss it out of hand. I guess just sort of thinking back, I did a degree in building a long time ago, which I then never used in the workplace at all. And my dad was a teacher. He used to do plumbing in school holidays. So that idea of, you have to see it to be it, I guess I'd had a little bit of an insight into it.
Because it's quite a jump, isn't it, to go from effectively a white-collar job to something where you're having to use your hands all the time. I mean, I would be the world's most useless plumber. I know that I couldn't do that, but you clearly must have an aptitude for it.
Well, I guess so. I mean, the thing for me that was really very clear in my mind is if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it properly. I didn't want to be the sort of person who does a bit of DIY and thinks that they can go out and, replumb a house or something like that. I thought, I'll do this properly. So I went back to college. I went to West London College in Southall, did the City and Guilds in plumbing alongside a group of people who were, mostly younger than my own children, and actually really enjoyed it. Found that whole experience really energising.
Can I ask roughly how much that cost you to do?
It didn't cost me anything because I wasn't earning. So that was.
So you there's no fees or anything?
No, not
what's not
as,
to like?
As someone who isn't earning, then it was paid for.
And so how long did that take?
That was a 1-year course.
So what happened then? Did you go and work for a plumber? Did you set up your own firm, or how did you do it?
So about halfway through the course, I was starting to think about, okay, what does this lead to? And I started working with friends and family, just sort of on a free basis to say, if you're prepared to trust me, I'll do it for you for nothing. And that really built up my experience. I was also very fortunate. A family friend is a builder. He gave me a lot of advice and experience as well. And then, in the summer when I'd done the course, I thought, right, no time like the present, and just set myself up in business and moved on from there, really.
Because there's a lot of demand for plumbing at the moment, isn't there? And there aren't enough plumbers around. So, I mean, it was a good market to identify. And how's it all gone?
It's gone very well,
I mean, how long have you been doing it now?
So summer of last year I started. That's about 8 months now, something like that.
No regrets?
No, not at all. Really enjoying it. I like running my own business. That's the other part of it. It's great to be out meeting customers face to face. And I just consider myself very fortunate. I mean, I think there's a little bit of a tendency. We saw some of it in the Charlie Mullins clip there, to think of one sort of job is all good and one sort of job is all bad. University is terrible, apprenticeships are good, apprenticeships are terrible, university is good. That sort of very polarised view. And I think the truth is actually far more nuanced than that. And I consider myself very lucky to have been able to do both.
And how surprised are you when you turn up on someone's door that you're not Polish?
Well, that I'm not Polish.
Yeah. Well, because people always think that tradespeople nowadays tend not to be British.
I'm not sure. I think when they take on someone called Steve,
I think that's a perception.
Pretty good idea. Yeah. There's a perception, maybe. Yeah, but. So my customers have always been very welcoming and very helpful.
And how do you sort of tout for business as a plumber?
A lot of it's word of mouth, and I think this is it's very important. You do a good job for somebody, and that's fundamentally that's about doing the plumbing job well. But there's also other parts around it, around communication and tidying up after yourself and things like that. And local WhatsApp groups have been very, very good. If you do a good job for somebody, word gets round and. It's been a great experience.
I mean, let's give you a free plug. I mean, I don't know which part of the country you're operating in.
I'm in Ealing in West London.
It's one of our previous guests lives in Ealing. I can pass her your number.
Okay.
Do you have a website or anything? How can people get in touch?
Yeah, stevemossplumbing.com is the very snappily named website.
Well, I'm sure LBC customers would love to take on your services. Thank you very much indeed, Steve. Right, well, I want to know whether you've thought about what Steve... Actually, just one final question. I sound like Columbo now. Just one more thing. What competed with plumbing? Because you must have had a sort of range of things that you were thinking of doing.
So what was interesting, teaching was the other thing I thought of. A good friend of mine...
That's what I always thought of doing.
Yeah, a good friend of mine was a solicitor for a long time. And then he moved into to teaching on a law course. So sort of teaching HR was something I looked at, but without huge enthusiasm. But actually what I found was that the jobs that I looked at were looking for teaching experience, teaching qualifications.
Yeah.
So I had this sort of big bank of, as you say, 35 years of HR experience, which was actually quite hard to bring into a situation where I could pass that on to other people, which was a bit disappointing, to be honest.
Okay,
but
Steve,
no regrets.
Thank you very much indeed. Right, the number to call, 0345 6060 973. Do you feel unsafe in your employment at the moment, whatever you're doing? I'd love to know what the reasons are. What are you thinking of doing should the terrible day come where your job no longer exists, how would you do what Steve's done? I mean, he's clearly enjoying it. He's clearly been very successful. He's clearly been very enthusiastic about it. But how do you actually choose which road to go down? And I mean, he got 3 qualifications for doing what he's doing in the world of plumbing. Now, that's not always going to be the same, is it? Sometimes retraining costs quite a lot of money. Have you thought about how you might retrain? 0345 6060 973. It's 22 minutes past 9.
This is LBC.
9:23 on LBC. Michael says, Iain, how can you claim that there is disproportionate discrimination against older people in employment when every job's worth in the media, assuming means me, says that young people don't deserve to be paid the same because they're inexperienced? It's nonsense. Business treats someone well from day one and they have a more loyal workforce. The problem is businesses wanting to squeeze as much overheads out of least investment. I can see where you're coming from on that. I don't think it is possible to argue that every young person is delivering the same value as an older person in a company. I suppose it depends on which sector you're in, because the job does involve training. Should you be paid the same as a fully trained person as a sort of 18-year-old starting out in a job? I don't think you should, no. And I am speaking as somebody who, in all the different companies that I've run, very small companies, it has to be said, I've given loads of opportunities to young people. I've paid them as much as I felt I could. But no, so I'll give you an example. In my publishing company, would I pay a 20-year-old editor the same that I would pay a 40-year-old editor? No, I wouldn't, because they're still learning on the job. A 40-year-old editor isn't. So I don't think that your whole point there really does stack up. I think there are lots of older people in their 50s and 60s who feel that they are put on the scrap heap if they are made redundant from a job. And I think it's far more difficult for anyone in their late 50s, early 60s to get a job in the same sector that they were in, as our last guest, Steve Moss, rather proved. Let's go to Kevin, who's a first-time caller in Preston. Hello, Kevin.
Oh, hello there. Good evening.
Evening. What would you like to say?
Well, I'd just like to say that I'm 67 years old now, but in 2013, I suffered 5 cardiac arrests in 5 hours and I died 5 times.
Wow.
Previous to that,
I'm going to treat you very gently, Kevin.
Printing presses in, and I decided to go into journalism in 2021. So I applied to UCLan University, which is now the University of Lancashire, and I did a degree in journalism, got a BA in journalism, a 2-1. I've set myself up as a freelance journalist, but I'm not working as a journalist yet. Enjoying it, and conversant in radio packages, TV packages, and I love it. But I'm looking to go into something. But at my age, it's very difficult.
What are the main challenges? Is it the fact that you're 67? That's the main challenge.
I think that's the main challenge, yes. And I believe that, they're getting rid of more journalists, people than ever now, and AI is taking over, and there's so much talent out there that at my age, I haven't got the track record to get me into the business and into the media, and that's my concern, really.
Do you think also, though, that the fact that, and I get told this from so many people nowadays, that the rates, if you're a freelance journalist in particular, the rates are being cut every year, and what you would have been paid, say, £200 for 5 years ago, you're now being paid 50 quid for.
I believe so, yes, and I'm new to all this, and I'm not familiar with the rates of pay. But recently, I did some work for Blob Preston, which is a local community thing, and I did 3 stories for them. And I'm trying to get into the NUJ, which is like trying to join MI5, I can tell you.
Really?
And they said I needed 3 paid stories, so I did 3 stories for Blob Preston, and the rate had a story and a video, and it was £25 per story, including the video. So I think that's a sign of what you get for doing freelance journalism, which took me 4 or 5 hours for each story. So a lot of time in there. So the pay is rubbish. But I'm not really interested in the pay. I'm more interested in doing the job, you know.
While you've been speaking, I've been trying to think, okay, what advice can I, given that I work in the same sector as you, what advice can I give you? And the only bit of advice that I can come up with, which I think actually might be quite helpful, is in this modern world, particularly in the media, niche is everything. And if you can sell yourself as an expert on something that you know like the back of your hand, and you can write about that in an authoritative way, you can do all the multimedia stuff as well, I think that is a tremendous advantage. Whereas if you're just a generalist, you would think being a generalist and being able to write about anything would be a strength, and in some ways it is. But also, given that local newspapers have, I won't say died out, but they are twitching in the death throes, I think, at the moment. There is a gap in the market there, I think, for good authoritative local news and comment. And if you can turn your hand to that in your own area, I'm not going to say you'll become rich by it, but it might be an opportunity worth exploring.
Yeah, I'm not really interested in the money as such. It's more just getting into the media and getting out there and meeting people, interviewing people, and I find that enjoyable. So money is secondary. You know, I know you won't get rich being a journalist unless your name's Nick Ferrari, or but it's the job itself. I find it exciting.
Also, start a blog, start a Substack, and you will be able to accumulate a readership for that, and it sort of puts you out there, and you never know what might come from it. Kevin, the best of luck. Thank you very much indeed for phoning in. I've always thought if I decided to do something completely different, I would like to be a tour guide. Now, I'm not sure what training I would need for that, but I've always thought it would be a really nice job to show foreign people around Britain on sort of coach tours and things, be the person at the front of the coach with the microphone. See, I need to have a microphone, don't I? I'm addicted to it. I mean, I'm not sure that counts as retraining if I have a microphone. So any ideas for retrain? I'm not intending to sort of need to retrain, but in this business, you never know. 0345 6060 973. One of my esteemed producers, I'm not sure which one it is, I think it might be Grace, has put on my screen Jack the Ripper tours, Ian. No Grace, no country tours, the sort of Yorkshire moors, that sort of thing. That's what I really had in mind, sort of tours of Edinburgh. Nice tours. I don't want any nasty business, thank you very much. It's 9:30 on LBC News Headlines with Daisy Steele.
Police say they're assessing information about private flights in and out of Stansted Airport following the publication of the Epstein files. Millions of documents related to the paedophile financier Jeffrey Epstein were unsealed by the US government last month. Former Prime Minister Gordon Brown's called for authorities to urgently re-examine claims about women being trafficked to the UK. Barack Obama says Jesse Jackson laid the foundation for his campaign to run for president of the United States. The activist, who was a leading light in the struggle against segregation and racism in the US, has died at the age of 84. And bomb disposal experts are investigating items found at a house in Plymouth after several homes were evacuated and a cordon was put in place. A man's been arrested on suspicion of possessing a firearm without a certificate. LBC weather dry this evening with frost in places, wet and windy weather arriving overnight in the southwest. Lows tonight between -4 and 8 Celsius.
Weekdays from 7 a.m.
This is taxation without representation.
Straight to the point.
Do you get giddy with all these U-turns?
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
Lucky he gets up in the morning, really, isn't it?
Listen on our free Global Player app or the LBC app. Download it. Iain Dale. Alexa, send a comment to LBC.
9:34. We're talking about the possible need for people to think about retraining. It's the sort of thing I think that most people don't think about until it's forced on them. We heard that from Steve Moss, who had been made redundant from his job as an HR director, which is slightly ironic when you think about it, because you think it's possibly him that's doing the firing, but there we are. And he retrained as a plumber. And I think people need to think nowadays, well, what job is going to be insulated from AI? And I think it is largely jobs to do with your hands, isn't it? Well, you're never going to get AI to be able to be a plumber. You're never going to get AI to be a bricklayer or a carpenter or a joiner. Anything to do with the building trade, I suppose, apart from being an architect, because I suppose, can you have AI architects? I don't know. But AI is going to change the whole jobs market within the next 10 years, I think. Do you remember a few months ago, I interviewed Piers Linney, who'd been on Dragon's Den, and he told me that the university milk round, where all the big companies and like management consultancies, banks, law firms, they go around all the top universities and they recruit graduates. Well, the number of graduate jobs on offer from those companies last year had been reduced by 33% in 1 year. I mean, I was completely taken aback by that, and it's really made me think a hell of a lot about this subject, because the people who are involved in professional trades, essentially what we used to call white-collar work, everyone is going to have to think, well, okay, how long is my job going to be valid for? How long is it before my company decides that my role is redundant here, that AI can effectively do my job? It is a horrific thought, and I've always thought, well, AI can never take over for radio presenters, can it? I'm becoming less sure of that as every month goes on, when I sort of learn more about the capabilities of AI. It's perfectly possible that you could develop an Iain Dale bot. I mean, the thought of that, they're all looking at me in absolute horror through the glass there. The thought of an Iain Dale bot presenting this programme for 3 hours. I mean, I don't know how. I mean, I can kind of see how you could present a phone-in through AI, but you couldn't present cross-question through AI, could you? So I've always got that to hang on to if it all goes wrong, I suppose. But everybody's got to have those very same thoughts. Could AI do my job? And if you think it could within the next 5 years, and you're more than 5 years off retirement age, then you need to give your head a shake, don't you? You need to think about, well, what do I do? Particularly if you're somebody who is relied upon for the family income. You've got maybe children in school or at university. You can't afford not to be employed. So what do you do? How do you retrain? How do you decide what to retrain as? 0345 6060 973. Grace is trying to redeem herself now by saying, a bot couldn't replace you, Iain. Hopefully not. Jerry's in Whitley Bay. Hello, Jerry.
Good evening, Iain.
Hi.
I did an MSc in economics after I finished university, and I learned very little in that other than it's an very imperfect science. One student said to me one day, a key phrase, everything in life is free bar labour. And when I thought about it, I turned that round, and it means the price of everything is the price of the labour required to produce it. So if you increase the minimum wage and you take into account differentials, you put up the minimum wage, you increase the cost of production. And we've put up the minimum wage, we've put up it for the young by about 33%, which makes them significantly more disadvantaged, and we're seeing that in the stats today. We've had the national insurance increase, which is another cost on employment. That comes on top of the Tories who put up corporation tax by about 25%. We've got the Employment Rights Bill coming. That has got likely costs and certainly potential liabilities, which companies will be looking at. And there's only so many ways a company can deal with this. It can either increase productivity, and if we could do that, maybe AI is the answer, but we've been trying to do that since the financial crash and not succeeded. You can just decide your sums don't add up and go bust. You can stop hiring, you can cut staff, you can basically end up, the only other option is to increase prices, and then what you get is inflation as a result.
Yeah.
So basically, if you keep increasing the minimum wage and you keep having to pay differentials up, your minimum wage increase just increases inflation. And if you have 10% more money, but everything costs 10% more, you're not any better off. Then we have the phenomenon where Starmer is celebrating all these interest rate cuts. Now, why have we been cutting interest rates when over the last 18 months, until the last couple of months, inflation has been going up? And that's because the Bank of England takes into account two factors. One is inflation, and the other is the direction of the economy. And the Bank of England clearly thinks that what the government has done is put the economy on a downward slope, and it's now bringing down interest rates because it sees the effect of the damage on the economy is greater than the increase in inflation. So that's nothing to celebrate. The other thing is austerity, and we've had the Labour Party for years saying the problem was Tory-induced austerity. But what they forget is austerity is a double-sided coin, in that if you have government austerity, you cut what the government spends and people and businesses keep more of their money, which means they can invest more. If you go the other way, it means businesses pay more and people pay more, which equals austerity on business and people. And that means austerity for business and cost of living being an increased pressure as a result of taking more out of people's wages so they have less money to spend. So all we have done under Labour is swap government austerity for people austerity.
I find it difficult to argue with any of that, to be honest. But I think it's even worse than that, because what we've got now are sectors of the economy. Let's take graphic design as a good one, where some people work for companies as graphic designers, others will work on a freelance basis. About, I don't know how long ago it was, but a website was set up called Fiverr, so Fiverr, and that basically uses people in often Far Eastern countries to do say you want to design a book cover. You can get that done now for literally a fiver by paying someone in Pakistan to design a book cover or a Christmas card or anything like that. And they send it to you within 24 hours, and you've paid £5 for something that in this country, if you were to pay a professional graphic designer to do, well, it would cost a multiple of that, obviously. But with AI, you can do it yourself. I mean, I've now learned how to use ChatGPT to make images that I can use on my Substacks, for example, or on my social media. And it can do it just as well as any professional graphic designer. I mean, some of the images you do have to sort of get it to tinker with, but in the end you get there. And I'm paying, I think it's £20 a month to ChatGPT to do this, and you get more or less unlimited amounts of designs. So by doing that, that has put a graphic designer out of work for a bit. And virtually every white-collar sector that you can think of, that phenomenon is happening, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, yes. But we've got to look at this as a two-headed coin. We have moaned and moaned and moaned because we can't work out how to increase productivity. If I have, let's say, 100 employees producing 10 widgets a month, and I can find a way to produce 15 widgets per employee, I can either produce 50% more widgets, or I can cut my workforce accordingly, and therefore my cost base. Mm. So you've got to look at this as the sort of the common, what they would call the Luddites. You have machinery that creates benefits. If you go back to the days of computing, in the early 80s, everyone was saying computers will just replace everybody's jobs. And they didn't, because you needed huge numbers of software writers, people who upgraded software, people who were in hardware, who had to produce faster chips, lighter chips. The whole industry in that So what you tend to get is a culling of jobs in certain industries, and you get a creation of new industries. And part of the problem I think we've had in the UK and particularly Europe, which was one of the reasons why I wanted to leave Europe, but sadly we didn't get quite what I wanted, was that Europe regulates everything to death. So when computing came in and all the various other elements, they over-regulated it all. The USA didn't. It just said, go and do whatever, and we'll sort out the bad bits, when they appear. And it's the same now in Europe with AI. They now want to regulate it to death. So any industry setting up in Europe will sharp find that they're up against regulation in Europe. They can't really grow, so they'll just relocate to the USA. In 1990, the size of the economy in the EU was about the same as the USA. The USA is now about 33% bigger. So we've got to be really careful with regulation as to how we go. And there just seems to be a culture in Europe and here that everything has to be safe. And it has to be safer next year than it was this year, and safer the year after. And all this adds regulation and cost, and it all finds its way through into the end product.
Yeah, and it's also about something that we talked about, I think it was last night on the programme, about the fact that regulation and legislation will only ever be light years behind the technology. And I've never come across any form of technology which has actually been regulated well. And so if you over-regulate an industry and regulate it badly, that industry is never going to thrive. And I'd really like to understand more about what's happening in other European countries in this debate, because I suspect that we might be a bit of ahead of the curve in this country, in this area, because I think we're seeing what the potential for AI is, and we're sort of trying to grapple with, well, is it all a threat, or is it also an opportunity? And I always go back to the 1980s when computerization first came in, and people thought that was going to destroy virtually every job in the country, or every white-collar job in the country. It didn't. Well, it did destroy some jobs, but so many more were created because new industries sprung up as a result of computerization. Now, whether that's going to happen with AI, I don't know. I'm not qualified to go into that, but I'd love to know. Maybe, we've only got 13 minutes left in the programme, but if you're living in a European country and you want to contribute to this debate, you'll be very, very welcome. Jerry, great call. Thank you very much indeed. It's 9:47.
Coming up at 10 on LBC, Ben Kentish.
Nigel Farage unveiled Reform's shadow cabinet today, but does it?
Text 84850. Alexa, send a comment to LBC.
9:51 on LBC. Stephen says, imagine being old in the USA and having to retrain after already spending $200,000 on my education, and then face massive age discrimination in hiring, being older than your professors. And I'm only 50. You see, there was a time when I used to think 50 was really old, but now I'm 63. I think it's actually quite young. But it is an awful thought that if you're 50, you're effectively sometimes, depending on the sector that you're in, you're effectively being written off. Right, Phil in Peterborough says, I work in learning and development in hospitality and do a lot of work around early careers. Noted the point around NICs and minimum wage. The best approach would be to allow employers to draw down on the apprenticeship levy pot to not only fund the apprenticeship qualification, but also the wage or a portion of it while they're starting their careers. Sadly, governments like it when the levy isn't fully spent, as it then becomes money for the Treasury. Yeah, the Treasury, the root of all evil in this matter, I would controversially say. Another text here from Tony. Tony from accounts, he says, I have been made redundant from my IT job at a UK pharma company. I'm thinking of retraining as a Labour Party economist or chancellor. Would this be a good move? Could be a short-term job, Tony, possibly. So I'm not sure. If you want a long-term job, not sure that's the one to go for. Darren is in Bermuda. Don't think I've ever had a call from Bermuda before. Hi, Darren.
Hello, how are you?
Very well, thank you. What would you like to tell us?
we're talking about trades here, and I haven't retrained for a trade. I have been a trade since I left school, which is the HVACR industry, so heating, ventilation, air conditioning, refrigeration, which is a trade, an unknown trade. We used to call it the unknown trade. Everyone knows plumbers, everyone knows electricians, but nobody really knew that people were out there doing refrigeration and air conditioning, etc., etc. And
it's not a glamour trade, is it?
It certainly isn't. It certainly isn't. It's very, very hard work. But you were talking to Mr. Steve Moss earlier, and fair play to him, but he done City and Guilds for 1 year, plumbing, and off he went on his own. I had to do it for 4 years. And then I had another 6 years before I was actually able to go out and confidently do my trade. So it's a very long process. But one of the things is, as you say, it's not glamorous, but it was very underpaid for the amount of hours that you have to do. And so,
can I be facetious?
To go into it.
Can I be a little bit facetious here, Darren? Because I'm thinking, you're in Bermuda. Is there a lot of call for heating engineers in Bermuda?
No, but air conditioning is rife.
Ah, yes, absolutely. You wouldn't want a house in Bermuda without air conditioning, would you?
No, you wouldn't. You certainly wouldn't. It becomes unbearable here at certain times.
How come you've ended up in Bermuda?
Just because I was sitting in an office in the UK being a manager of an air conditioning firm for somebody else, a large facilities company. And the ironic thing is when I was 19, I applied to come to Bermuda from an advert, and I was denied because, as it turns out, I couldn't get a work permit because I didn't have enough experience. So many years later, when I was in my mid-30s, another opportunity arose, and I applied for it, and eventually somebody contacted me and went, "Are you still interested?" I said, "Yes, I am." And they went, "Okay, well, let's go through the process," because the ironic thing is in Bermuda is most people are immigrants. I'm an immigrant. I now own a company in Bermuda, and I'm still an immigrant, and some of my employees are immigrants, because there isn't the skill set here or the people willing to do the blue-collar jobs, even here. In Bermuda, the majority of people are reinsurance. This is no word of a lie. $1 million a year is not an unknown wage for people in Bermuda.
Oh, you're taking me back to my first job in journalism, where I was insurance correspondent for Lloyd's List, and I had to write about reinsurance in Bermuda. I didn't even know what the word reinsurance meant, but ended up writing a 1,500-word article, and nobody could tell that I didn't know what I was talking about, which I thought was a pretty good skill at the time, and I've learnt a lot from that. Darren, thank you very much indeed. Let's go to Colin in Woodford. Hello, Colin.
Hello.
Hi, what would you like to say?
Yeah, just a very, very simple point, really. More the fact that, we hear a lot about, AI coming down the road, and we should be looking at alternatives in terms of skills training and what have you. And typically they say plumbing, electrician type work. I was thinking to myself, well, that makes some sense, but there's surely a limit to that in terms of if we all went out tomorrow to be reskilled as plumbers and electricians, I mean, there's a question of supply and demand. How many do we really need? I know there's a lot of young kids at the moment, who are out of work, and we need to get them into the employment market, let alone those people who are, much older thinking about retraining. So you've kind of got that as well. And also the other thing I was thinking to myself, well, if white-collar professionals are losing their jobs, they're the ones who typically go out, have the money, the disposable income to have that extension, that loft extension and what have you. And if they're losing their job, they're losing their livelihood, there can't be less money floating around. So I'm thinking there's a kind of limit to, how much work there would be if we all decided tomorrow, we're going to train as plumbers now. So, I know it's a very simplistic point, but, I just sort of be interesting to see how this all plays out. And also on the point of AI in itself, I mean, I work in the IT industry myself. And yes, there are changes. There's a lot of automation, but we're having to skill ourselves in how we embed automation into processes. So there's a shift in what's required. So, there's a lot of ifs and buts. But, there's the simple point I was making.
And you made it very well, Colin. Thank you very much indeed. Nick says, Iain, I teach bricklaying. I did think, like you, that trades would be safe from AI. I've changed my mind. AI can design buildings with AI-friendly materials, built by robots, programmed by AI. Alas, even trades like bricklaying are not secure. Sorry. I mean, how could you get a robot to build a house? I mean, would I want to actually buy a house that had been built by a robot? I really don't think so. But I suppose stranger things have happened. Well, listen, thank you all very much for all of your calls this evening on LBC. I'll be back tomorrow from 7. Remember, it's Zach Polanski, the leader of the Green Party, with me from 7 tomorrow for an hour, taking your calls. We want to get a really wide variety of calls on, so I hope you'll all take part in that. Coming up at 1 on LBC, it's Jim Diamond. But right now, here's Ben Kentish.
Iain, thank you very much indeed. Hello there. A very good evening to you this Tuesday night. Ben Kentish here with you on LBC at 10 o'clock.
Too often, the criticism over the last 20 months has been that we're a one-man band, but the time has come to broaden the party.
Nigel Farage today unveils reforms of